Okay, cool. Hi, Weston.
Hello.
Hey. Okay, so now we're just gonna get started with our little introduction. So, hi everyone. I'm Isaac Applebaum. I'm from Pennsylvania, Pennsbury High School. I'm a graduating senior. I did congressional debate for 4 years. Next year, I'll be attending the George Washington University in DC. We assembled a really great staff, and we all worked really hard to put on this tournament for you guys. We really hope that you would consider donating to the National Domestic Abuse GoFundMe that we set up. It's a really important cause, and it's something that is really important to all of us at the tab staff and whatnot. And we really hope you guys would consider donating and also taking a look at those resources and whatnot. The other important thing to mention is this round is separated into basically two essential parts. So you guys will be here for about 2 hours just for timekeeping stuff. And I'd want to introduce our esteemed judge panel of some great judges that we've assembled for this round. So if you guys, when I call your name, you can choose to give a paradigm, or if you don't want to give a paradigm, we could just move on, and no pressure. So first, Sydney Tay, would you like to give a paradigm?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sydney. I'm I guess now sophomore at UPenn studying econ. I did Congress for 4 years, and basically just look to make sure you're relevant in the round and that you're refuting people.
Awesome. Okay, Jack Fitzgerald.
Howdy, I'm Jack, currently attending Florida State, competed for 3 years. My paradigm basically works in 3 parts. First and foremost is quantified and substantiated data. Opinions are not facts. We use facts to support our arguments. Therefore, we should not use opinions to support our arguments. If you don't have a number or something that is unquantifiable but objectively true, something like a law or like a historical event, then it's not really evidence. Second thing is impacts. I want to see humanized impacts. That is to say that I want to see everybody talking about impacts that actually affect real people. So I want to hear the word people or some derivative of it, Americans, workers, etc. Just want to know how policies are actually positively or negatively impacting people for the aff and neg respectively. And then finally is net offense. It's not enough to just tell me why the other side is wrong. You have to tell me why your side is right, which means that just defensively refuting everybody is not going to cut it. I need you to, at the very least, extend some positive benefits of your side on the aff or some harms on the neg. Other than that, I'm tabula rosa. Have fun.
Awesome, thank you. Rainin Meow.
Hi, my name is Rainin, like the weather. I'm a first year at Wash U, and I also did Congress for 4 years. So my paradigm is just really prioritizing weighing and refutation, because I think engaging with other people in the round is really, really important. Good luck.
Awesome, thank you. Weston Elkins.
Hi, so I'm Weston Elkins. I'm the coach in Houston, Texas. I competed for 4 years when I was in high school and qualified for nationals twice. My paradigm would be basically to understand that the debate should shift the longer you're debating a piece of legislation. So don't just continuously rehash arguments or offer them as if they're offered for the first time if we've already heard them. Instead, discuss how you're contributing to the debate on that argument that has already been presented. So, and I'd also like to see real clash. So it's not enough to just throw names of people who have said something, actually clashed with what they said, which means to directly refute it or to undermine it, mitigate it in some way. Other than that, just enjoy yourself and have fun.
Thank you. Last but not least, Tina Tarigian.
Hey guys, it's Tina. Yeah, basically what everyone else said, especially with the refutation and weighing. Last online round I judged, there was like a serious lacking of people doing that. But more importantly, please don't use exploitative rhetoric. And yeah, I'm glad to see everyone here for such a great cause. I'm good, that's all.
Awesome. So that is our judge panel. This is a really great team that we put together. We really hope you guys have a good time. We're gonna get started here in a few minutes. Matt, Melodie, Perry, you guys have any last questions, comments, concerns, or anything you guys want to say?
Okay.
Have fun.
Have
fun.
Yeah. Go do it after the round, not now, but like after the round, go donate.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and please consider donating and stuff like that. I think we're good to get started.
Oh, one last quick
Oh yeah,
thing.
sure thing. Yeah.
If everybody can actually have their last names in their name handle, just so that we know when we're flowing.
Yeah, that's important too. Yeah, please make it like, if you guys could make it just like Senator, like last name, or like just your last name would be fine. I don't think we have any duplicate last names, so I think we're good there. If you guys just want to rename yourselves, we'll just do that real quick and then we'll get started here. Okay. And we'll just go along, and we don't have to wait for everyone to do their name now, so we'll just get started. Okay, so we hope that you guys prepared to we can at least hope that we prepared the first piece of legislation as part of our scenario. And you senators have been called in this emergency session of Congress, and we need a debate. So on the first piece of legislation, I'd ask everyone to make sure that their camera's on. Do we have a sponsor on the piece of legislation? Please raise your placard if anyone would like to sponsor. Uh-oh. Okay. I'm going to ask again, do we have a first affirmative? Okay. So we need a first affirmative to begin the debate on today's piece of legislation.
Motion.
Yes.
I move for a 1-minute in-house recess.
I'm gonna grant that for the 1 minute. We're just gonna take the minute, guys, and see if you can figure out amongst yourselves. Please, someone has to give the first affirmative. So
who's AF on this bill? Just a raise of hands, please. Any of y'all want to give that first AF, or? All right, nobody. Cool.
I can do it. I don't mind, but like if I have like another minute or something like that.
Okay.
All right.
okay, yeah, we'll just take a. That's fine. We don't even have the motion. Just take the minute, and we'll get started.
I didn't see. Was it about an even split between AF and neg, or no? Oh, much more negs? Okay.
Gluco, when you're ready, just let me know.
I'm ready.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna call again. So, all right, Mr. Medigovic, do you have a first affirmative? Okay, awesome. You have the floor.
Perfect. So just as a quick recap, everyone can hear me fine and there's no audio issues or something like that. Amazing. Is anybody not ready? Alrighty. Evolvements in this coronavirus pandemic have created the epitome of what is political quarrels on both ends of the aisle. We have reached the state where people are so obstinately blind towards their own viewpoints that they are willing to kill each other just because of heated politics occurring in this country. Today's legislation is all about providing the solution we need to minimize the collateral damage to the American public and the 320 million constituents we have outside this room that depend on us for actual reform. Please pass my bill. First, pass today's legislation because it actually is the best shot we have towards minimizing all of this calamity. Right now, in recent publishings and reports that we've heard, plenty of heated quarrels in terms of politics have rendered too many dead and injured because of Southern radicalist Republicans that are so upset at the very fact that Nancy Pelosi is now assuming the office as president instead of Mr. Trump and his vice president, Mr. Pence. What the result is tons of damage everywhere. Police militarization is one of the most common offsets of this. Harvard University in 2017 notes that police militarization has increased to $1.5 billion a year, a 1,414% spike. And all of this is because of DoD negligence in the form of what's called a 1033 program. You see, what will happen is that all of our military and excess equipment will just donate it to the police on contingency operations. However, this is our opportunity to actually take that back and resolve this all of this issue writ large. Newsweek says that in October of 2014, that the 1033 program has militarized police forces with a $4.6 billion worth of equipment from the Department of Defense. By sending our troops with this legislation managed by the Department of Defense, not only can we seize that back to reduce their militarization, but we actually have the opportunity to address this comprehensively. Why is this so important? Well, specifically, we need to be targeting the most militarized entities, which in this occurrence happens to be the law enforcement agencies in the South themselves. The New Yorker in March of 2018 presents the reason, saying that Southern sheriffs renegade the most frequently because they're the ones that embody the most radically conservative law enforcement agencies. It isn't just general populaces that obstinately support Trump and Pence. It's also the law enforcement agencies that are adding fuel to the fire. The only option we have to fight fire with fire is our strong military that can guarantee efficacy. If we want to see the actual reform that saves thousands of Americans, the only option, the most prudent one, is affirmation.
Awesome. Speech time of 2 minutes and 53 seconds. Now move on to 4 blocks of 30 seconds of questioning. Okay. Before we begin, do we have any questions? Please raise your placards. Senator Rodriguez.
Hi, Mr. Medigovic. So if these police departments in these areas are the most militarized in the country, how easy is it going to be for our military to actually stop them?
Probably not that easy. Like definitely like getting in these altercations is going to be difficult. But the fact of the matter is that they're militarized. We have no choice
if we put a militarized force against another militarized force, how are we going to win?
So it's already reached its maximum. The point here is de-escalation through our military.
Isn't this the same as all of our foreign policy? Like how successful is that?
Senator Moss.
So I'm a little confused how this bill gets rid of the 1033 program. Can you point out the section that it says that?
So you're absolutely right. There's no explicit removal, and nor am I advocating for its like complete barring whatsoever. But in the status quo, where so many Southern police forces are militarized by the 1033 program, which is at the discretion of the Department of Defense, we have the ability to revoke that just temporarily to solve and de-escalate.
But we have the ability to revoke that without the bill. I don't understand how this bill leads to that being revoked.
It's because it's in tandem with our troop forces that minimize.
Senator Dorworth.
Hi, so angry conservative Americans own firearms. So when you pass this legislation and put boots on ground to fight them, isn't that only going to exponentially worsen like the violence since they can use their guns to kill our guys?
They do own firearms, but an even more pressing matter is the fact that radically conservative law enforcement agencies in these vicinities are taking their side. The only way to actually put an end to those
agents— Are they taking their side by fighting them in the public?
Fighting them in the public? Some sad realities may have
violent action to suppress them. How is that on their
side? A powerful entity.
Okay, do we have any further questions? Senator Rodriguez?
Yeah, I'll take the last block.
Yep.
Hi again, Mr. Medigovic. So going back down that last line of questioning, isn't this exactly the same as all of the foreign policy we've been doing in countries such as Afghanistan, Yemen?
I'd argue not, because we have so much more discretion and leverage over these various agencies that we're seeking to demilitarize.
But they still have our weapons. We can't just snap our fingers and take them away. We would have to fight them. How does that not create an all-out war?
They do, but the ability for revocation that we have is so important here because it's key to demilitarizing.
Wouldn't this create mass casualties?
Okay, question time has elapsed. Okay, Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation negation speakers, please raise your placards. Okay, that will first go to Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you. Hi, Christian Rodriguez, whenever my judges are ready. Cool. Mr. Fitzgerald, are you ready?
They should be there. We're just going off the assumption that they're like pretty much all ready.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming the presiding officer is ready.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Just give me 1 second to turn on the timer and I'll get started. We have been spouting for decades and decades how political polarization is the greatest enemy to our country and our unity. And now it's finally reached its peak moment, where we are on the brink of a second American Revolution, a second civil war that will only result in more death, more casualties, and more all-out conflict than before. I ask you all, don't do the easy, politically safe solution of going to just deploy the military instead of seeking out a comprehensive, peaceful resolution. Please fail this bill for one key reason. This legislation creates an all-out war with our own people. Representative Medigovic would like to purport this idea that simply by passing this legislation and deploying our military, we just immediately end the conflict by snapping our fingers. Unfortunately, it's not that simple, Mr. Medigovic, especially when you look at FBI data from 2019 that finds the states that are mentioned specifically in the scenario update, Texas and Florida, have the highest rates of gun ownership in the entire country. The other 3 states, in the Louisiana, South Carolina, and Alabama, all have more than 100,000 gun registrations. So even if the police departments Mr. Medigovic talks about comply with us, we are fighting against thousands of our own people with guns who are willing to use it against our military. And I can't help but believe this is exactly like the foreign policy we've been conducting for the past few decades, in which we send our troops against civilian opposition in countries such as Afghanistan, Iraq, and create nothing but years of conflict and terrorism. But it gets much worse than this, because this isn't the first time we've seen anything like this in our own country. Specifically, when you look at police violence, take a look at Hannah McDonald from the Manhattan Institute on June 5th, 2015, who explains something known as the Ferguson effect. Basically, back when there was the Ferguson shooting and subsequent shootings that created rifts between police and the general population, there was increased distrust of the government that led to a 37% increase in murder in Baltimore, 50% in Houston, and 27% in Los Angeles. If anything, this creates a long-term conflict that will never be resolved. Because when we as a government shoot down our own people, we will never gain back their trust. So that begs the question, if the military isn't the solution, what is? I'd advocate for simply waiting this out and let the solution resolve itself. Why? Let's take a look at Amendment 25, Section 4, the specific amendment that put Nancy Pelosi in power, which the Cornell Law School explains would allow President Trump and Vice President Pence to reclaim their power as soon as they're healthy. And the only way Pelosi could keep the power away from them is by getting 2/3 majorities in both houses of Congress, something that is quite literally impossible politically, which basically means that considering they only need 14 days to recover, and it's already been 1 week, we simply have to wait 7 more days for them to reclaim power and all of this opposition to die down. Look for the peaceful solution, not for the one where we create Civil War 2.0. Thank you.
Okay, speech time of 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Okay, all questioners, please raise your placards now. Okay, that will first go to Senator Oriofe.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Oriofe.
Hey, Mr. Rodriguez, do you think we've reached the peak in the amount of killings?
Obviously it can get worse, but
exactly, they're increasing. So
right.
you're arguing that we should wait. We should wait for more and more people to die.
I'm arguing deploying the military will drastically increase the conflict and only result in long-term conflict.
Okay,
Waiting it out is a 1-month problem. Deploying troops is a 1-year problem.
Have we been implementing our military to have aid in other countries? I mean, I said in other countries, in the US right now for coronavirus relief?
Not until we pass this legislation.
Okay. Senator Resnick.
Hi, jumping right off
Hello. Hi. Jumping right off of Oreo Faye's questioning. What has happened in the past when we decided to employ military to stop the crisis in the past? For example, in New York.
Well, they've been deploying aid, but the problem is this legislation.
They were deploying military personnel. They deployed military personnel in order to flatten the curve. So
that's what I'm saying. The military personnel was for the purpose of aid. This legislation only makes that as a caveat. It doesn't necessarily say that is their specific purpose. Deploying the military in such a heightened situation of violence.
The purpose of today's legislation is to help people that are affected by violence.
But the radical conservatives don't see it that way.
Senator Blackwell.
Hi, Mr.
Senator.
Blackwell.
So these states that you're talking about have high gun ownership rates, correct?
Yes, and on top of Mr. Medigovic's point about police militarization.
So isn't this a reason to put boots on the ground?
Not at all. It would only increase conflict between our own military and our own people.
But if there's already conflict, why wouldn't we increase that?
Because I'd argue simply waiting it out and allow President Trump to reclaim power would create a peaceful solution. Deploying our troops creates an all-out war that could take years to resolve.
Okay. Senator Medigovic.
Hi, Mr. Medigovic.
Evening. So help me identify the relevant parties right here. We have radical conservative populists that is pretty much galvanizing this whole movement. And then you have radical law enforcement agencies that are empowering them.
Right.
We have jurisdiction and discretion to do whatever we want to leverage them. Why can't we use that to de-escalate the other?
Because like you said, they are radical and will not listen to us. They will side with the radical conservatives and fight against the United States military.
But they are at the behest of the programs we've created to help them. So if we suspend
them—
But
they already have our weapons, Mr. Medigovic. We can't just take it back immediately. They're going to fight us to keep them.
We literally have legal jurisdiction.
Questioning time has elapsed.
I thank the chair.
Seeing as that was a speech in the negation, any and all in the affirmation, please raise your placards. Okay, that'll go to Senator Ambravan unopposed.
I thank the chair. That's Senator Ambravan speaking for the first time this session, AMBRAVAN. I'm just going to assume the judges are ready. And PO? Although we're dealing with the infection of the coronavirus, we're also dealing with the affection of the negation, who's risking lives in spreading their false statements. The true test today is not a medical one, but it's whether or not we pass this legislation. So let's examine the first symptom of the sickness that's spreading from our chamber. At the beginning of today's debate, you got the major argument from Senator Rodriguez. This was the argument that we'd be forced to use ground troops in some way, shape, or form, impacting this to some negative effect. But what he has missed is a key aspect of this legislation and has fundamentally mischaracterized today's debate. Here's the problem with his argument. This legislation does not actually necessitate the actual use of ground troops, just the presence of the army, meaning that the use of military force does not need to happen. So let's turn to the Posse Comitatus Act, which was assessed this week. From and after the passage of this act, it shall not be lawful to employ any part of the Army of the United States as posse comitatus or otherwise, for the purpose of executing laws. So the Army includes medical personnel, the Army Corps of Engineering to help build medical centers, and tactical and logistical support on a scale that can only be rivaled by a titan like Amazon. So specifically, the CSIS in March 2020 explains, there are two kinds of military forces necessary: medical units and base facilities for quarantine. Medical personnel are vital if the number of infections exceed what the civilian healthcare system can handle. The military has a large medical establishment. We are struggling to secure supplies for thousands of ventilators and millions of masks. We are burdened by the haunting stories of nurses working 18-hour shifts, faced with the horrors of the front lines. Yet we stand by and we watch our very own constituents ravage the remnants of our medical equipment. I can't stand for that. And frankly, it's time that we take a step backwards towards protecting our most vulnerable population and pass today's legislation when we can ensure our Army personnel can step in and provide the healthcare that our people need. Because when bodies are dropping to the floor, it's not time to drop thinking logically. But next, Senator Rodriguez says that sending troops will result in civil war. But this fundamentally mischaracterizes today's debate because of the current pandemic. We aren't sending in troops to incite violence, but to save lives. Let's look to the status quo. The Washington Post explains that this government's emergency stockpile of respirator masks, gloves, and other medical supplies is running significantly low.
The issue is we need supplies. With the destruction of even more supplies, we grow more desperate every single day. So Senator Rodriguez, what you fail to recognize is that this legislation does not necessitate enlisting actual troops, just Army personnel. So when we pass, we don't have to bring violence, but we can solve the issues using the extensive medical equipment that the Army and medical personnel can provide. I don't want more violence, but I don't want people to keep dying, which is why today we affirm. It may take years to find a vaccine, and some of the best minds in this room have already introduced one. So let's pass before the history of our nation is tarnished with our country's inaction and the blood of our people.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 10 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Okay, they'll first go to Senator Pierre.
Thank you. You said the Posse Comitatus Act doesn't mean our troops will use force, right?
Yes.
But doesn't Section 1B suspend the Posse Comitatus Act so our troops can do whatever they want?
So what I'm saying is that the suspension of the Posse Comitatus Act only goes towards, it only specifies the Army. Army doesn't necessarily mean sending in-ground troops. We can...
Under the Posse Comitatus Act, they just act as policing force. Because we suspend it under Section 1B, they have the jurisdiction to do whatever.
Exactly, and that means we don't have to send in armed troops. We just can send in medical personnel who are going to help the people suffer.
Also,
Senator Dorworth. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Moss. Senator Moss, I apologize.
Hey, so does this bill allow us to deploy military forces and specifically armed soldiers?
Yes.
So that could possibly happen, and it can't happen right now if we don't pass this bill.
Sure, I'm saying it could definitely possibly happen, but the reason that we need to pass is because it also gives us the possibility to send in much needed medical aid.
So you're saying that it's worth the possibility of a civil war if there's also a possibility
Civil war does not have to break out if we decide not to send in troops. We can simply send in medical personnel.
But we could decide to send in troops, and this bill gives the military
If we all understand that sending in troops will incite more violence, then why would we decide to?
Question time has elapsed. Okay. Thank you for that speech. Seeing that was a speech in the affirmation, now move on to speech in negation. Negative speakers, please raise your placards. Okay, Senator Kaiser, you have the floor. Oh, you're on mute.
Got it.
There you go.
I thank the chair. Hi, everyone. That's Senator Kaiser, spelled K-A-I-S-E-R. Once again, K-A-I-S-E-R, speaking on the negation of today's legislation. Judges, all ready? PO ready? Great. Thank you so much. In 1793, we saw the outbreak of the yellow fever, and we weren't prepared. In 1918, we saw the outbreak of the Spanish flu, and we weren't prepared. And now we're experiencing the outbreak of COVID-19, and yet again, we aren't prepared. The issue at our hands is forcing our government to scramble for our response. But our irresponsibility is the only thing that's infectious. Don't let ignorance be the disease that puts this Congress in the ground. Fail. The fundamental reason about this legislation that makes me sick is the fact that it decreases citizen faith in government by allowing the military to be deployed in such a controversial situation. The Congressional update told us that Nancy Pelosi took the interim position and she is now president, and many conservative Americans have reacted violently. But because of this, reacting with the deployment of military troops isn't what we want to do. The Atlantic in January 15th of 2018 explains that domestic deployment against protests and rallies can lead to the perception of a politicized military, and this increases protests and decreases trust in government. Especially when the party that wasn't elected is in office and they decide to deploy troops, the perception of a politicized military is going to arise. Now, these citizens are going to fight back if the government interferes too much, and that only leads to more conflict. William G. Moseley from Foreign Policy explains in 2017 that when the military is forced to deliver humanitarian aid, there is a mixing of priorities that increases overall human rights abuses when deployed. This very situation was seen when the Human Rights Relief Mission was led in Africa just 3 years ago. Senator Bedegovic and Senator Armavon. It doesn't matter if it's just the presidents of the military there. That in itself, them distributing the aid, is what continues this conflict of interest and causes more human rights abuses. There is no way that we can use a military that isn't accountable to bring safety and accountability to a chaotic situation. But this combination of chaos and casualties leads to two catastrophic consequences. The first of which is that it facilitates long-term martial law. As Stanford University explains in August 21st of 2017, in a violent political struggle, the leadership must struggle to achieve acknowledgement of its leadership in the face of rival claimants, and it must punish traitors and informants. And yet typically it lacks the opportunities for establishing its legitimacy with regard to the undertaking of any of these tasks, meaning that the military is going to be forced to actually use force to get rid of the protesters and distribute those resources. That only incites violence and creates more conflict. That isn't what we're trying to do. But further, it creates a stressful situation which makes people more susceptible to COVID-19. The CDC explains on April 19th of 2020 that stressful situations suppress the immune system and make you more susceptible to acute respiratory illness. There is no doubt that these effects will be the same for COVID-19. In fact, 60% of the people registered to new hospitals are those who lived in stressful situations. What I'm saying is that these military abuses are going to incite more violence and overall lead to more chaos. Fail.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 11 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Okay. Go first to Senator Morales.
Hey, Senator, great speech. So as of right now, how effective are PCAs in the status quo?
Not very.
Not very, correct?
Yes.
So doesn't that give us initiative to pass these legislation considering that the PCA isn't effective?
Not necessarily, because if we're only going to incite violence and create more stressful conditions, there's no point in
You're
continuing.
getting around my question. What I am saying to you is why negate these legislation is essentially what we do in the status quo is not get rid of PCA.
Because the alternative isn't any better.
Senator Shirkova.
Hi, so you're concerned with the American people losing trust in their government, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but how are we supposed to trust our government if our government does nothing after literally thousands of people are being killed in the streets?
Okay, it makes no sense to deploy our military when the party that wasn't elected is in office. That's only going to cause more uprisings and more revolt from the people. So we're only going to have a more divided nation. There's no point in
okay, but these revolts are happening right now. So what are we supposed to do to mitigate them?
Definitely not pass this piece of legislation.
Okay, but then what should we do?
There are multiple alternatives, such as donating more ventilators and
Questioning
in other ways.
Questioning time has elapsed. Thank you, Senator. Seeing as that was a speech in the negation, all those in the affirmation, please raise your placards. Okay, that'll go to Senator Morales.
Perfect. That's Senator Morales. For the judges, spelled Morales. Any indication from my judges in the PO when you're ready, and I will be more than happy to begin. Ready?
Mr. Fitzgerald just needs 1 second. Jack, just let us know in the chat when you're ready. You're good.
Perfect. Since the attacks of September 11th, many long-held beliefs about the proper balance between civil liberties and the role of the government in protecting its citizens have been called into question. But now today, in the wake of the myths of CVOD-19, we have forced this emergency session of Congress, and in order to protect the prosperity of our people, we pass. But now first, we pass this legislation and let me clarify a common misconception in today's debate and answer what Senator Ambervan couldn't. Section 1B. With Section 1B, we successfully nullify the Posse Comitatus Act, and we finally are able to start mitigating violence and start saving lives in the status quo. So Senator Kaiser, you completely contradicted yourself during cross-ex, and this actually gives you reason to vote in the affirmation with me. So now let's turn to the Journal of Law and Policy, which states that the effectiveness of the PCA has declined over the course of the last 30 years. Legislative pressure, a lack of judicial enforcement, and numerous exceptions have taken their their toll on the PCA's strength in the long term. An increased public confidence in the military and judicial deference to military actions have undermined the principles upon which the PCA was founded. If Senator Rodriguez and the negation want to stand with our people, then they'll vote in the AF. But also, we need to understand that currently there is no assistance given by the federal government to states in situations like this. This isn't a state issue. This is now a federal issue, senators. And despite what the negation stands up here today and says in today's debate, let me be the first affirmation speaker in today's round to bring up the fact that they are in desperate need of assistance during these troubled times. And today's legislation successfully provides that assistance. So now, if you don't want to take my word for it, that's fine. But let's turn to the Heritage Foundation, which in 2013 stated that there are two basic kinds of militias: state defense forces, also known as state guards, state military reserves, or state militias, and naval militias. These forces are distinct from their state's National Guard in that they cannot be mobilized for federal service, and they are not funded by the US government. So Senator Kaser and Senator Rodriguez can champion the conflicts of interest between military action between these protests, but let me finally put this argument to rest. When we recognize the fact that state militias actually need our assistance, let's understand that state militias will be put in force when these conflicts arise either way. So all we are doing is putting more funding to the army in order to address this situation in its whole. We aren't Floridians, we aren't Texans, we aren't Californians, but we are Americans, and it's time to pass in order to protect our future. And this is where we step in with today's legislation. We cannot expect these misallocated militias to be able to withstand the current violence posed in our country. Let's finally stop being critical and start making miracles. Pass.
Okay, speech time of 3 minutes and 2 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Okay, Senator Senator Kaiser.
Okay.
Hi, Senator. Do we have any past precedent to indicate that actually interfering with states is a good idea?
Yes, we do have past precedents, but like as I was stating in my speech, they also need funding in order to address this situation. So
okay, so when the military gets involved in state matters, it leads to good things.
Essentially, yes. In the status quo, that's what I've seen.
Okay, can you name one example where that happened?
Well, actually, like we have several examples in which we've seen this, and one example I can give.
What's one?
All right. Well, one example I can give you for sure is, when we interfered with
Senator Dorworth.
I'm sorry. Are you aware of the Insurrection Act?
Yes.
Okay, so you do know that what this does is it allows the president to deploy troops without a state's request if an unlawful obstruction or civil unrest is creating barriers to execution of the law. So in either world, the president can still militarize.
Yes.
So what is the uniqueness of saying that we're not militarizing under today's legislation? We're only providing assistance.
That's not what I'm saying at all, Senator Dorworth. What I'm essentially implying is the fact that when we put funding and pass this legislation, we get the reform we need in the status quo to help our people.
But,
okay, question time has elapsed. Question time has elapsed. We'll move on to the next speaker. Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, we'll now move on to speech in negation. Negation speakers, please raise your placards. Negation speakers. Am I right? Are we on a negation speech? Okay, do we have any negation speakers? Wait, I thought we had a bunch of negations. Okay, Senator Dorworth, you have the floor. But I'd just like to point out we did have a bunch of negations, and okay, whatever. It's all good. All right.
Hi, everyone.
Senator Dorworth.
That's Senator Dorworth, D-O-R-W-O-R-T-H. Any indication, and I'll begin. Good. 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 Awesome. On April Fool's Day, COVID-19 took the lives of 1,000 Americans, and the economy continued to terrify vulnerable constituents. But on the same day, President Trump bragged that he was #1 on Facebook, making Americans afraid that narcissism was a bigger priority than empathy in the White House. But sadly, President Trump's disconnection from middle America isn't just a joke, but it's reality. And when these riots are getting out of hand, we can't use militarization and the force of hand to fix this problem. We have to have empathy. So first, fail today's legislation because it worsens civil unrest. And that's because when army personnel use force to stop civil unrest, it only makes riots worse. Now, Senators Rodriguez focused on how a lot of Americans have guns. They're angry and they're conservative. So they're willing to post up to a army personnel. But in the long term, it's not a smart idea to not only promote that, but the idea of retaliation in the long run. Because Washington Post in May of 2015, Michael Watzkowski tells you that the use of force on an unarmed crowd, especially one drawn from an already traumatized community, tends to foreclose the possibility of nonviolent action and instead promote physical retaliation. Representative Medigovic, police militarization only radicalizes civil unrest. But here's the impact of more civil unrest within the country. American University in August of 2016 explains the impact of education when we have civil unrest, saying that during the Michael Brown protests in Ferguson, Missouri, they found a 5% increase in chronic absence in the city's schools and a 15% increase of students scoring below basic in math and reading. We have to realize that our actions have serious ramifications, and we look to nonviolent protesters and violent protesters in the status quo. Pointing guns to their faces is not going to make them less violent. It's only going to radicalize the situation. But I want to move on to one of the most contested arguments in today's debate, and that's this idea that we're passing today's legislation, providing assistance and providing help with the help of the army, but we're not actually doing anything in terms of militarization, championed by both Senator Almavar and Morales. They are arguing whether we are militarizing state militias or just assisting them, but in either world, we can militarize. This legislation does not change that, because according to The Hill, in April 2020, Insurrection Act allows the president to use federal troops to suppress an insurrection at the jurisdiction of the state and local officials. So by passing today's legislation, you don't change that narrative, but you only incentivize that we militarize in the long run. So the affirmation has no grounding on that whatsoever. At the end of the day, we must realize that our actions have serious consequences. And when we look to how serious they can take our constituents, we have to realize that our hand should not be held softly, but it should take a hard precaution, but not whilst doing so, holding a gun up to our people's face. I urge you to fail today's legislation.
Thank you for that speech of 2 minutes and 45 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Okay, that will go first to Senator Umbraven.
Hi, Senator. So let's forget about militarization for now. These states need medical support, right?
Okay, are you seriously going to try and weigh medical support over an exponential increase in violent crime?
Like, where in this legislation does it actually mandate that we send in more troops?
We have $1 million of medicinal support, I believe, under this bill, humanitarian support, versus the 160 or the just countless deaths that will occur.
But regardless of whether we use the medical or support or not, we don't have to send in troops, right?
Actually, no. Any state official that wants to send in
why
troops,
can't we pass and decide not to
create that narrative when you pass?
Senator Oriofe.
Under this legislation, who has the jurisdiction to make sure that whether we're going to be militarizing or not?
The president and us.
And also the states, right? Because it's going to be in their states.
So the states can now say, like, hey, we can add troops whether we want to or not.
So they have the decision. Why not just make sure that they don't do it?
That's not what this bill is doing.
This bill gives us the option. Why not opt into the option of going to medical?
The bill is repealing a section that gives us the option that says that we can no longer use the army.
So it gives us an option. What's wrong with an option?
Okay, question time has elapsed. Thank you, senators. We'll now move on to the next speech. All those in the affirmation, please raise your placards. Okay, that'll go to Senator, just shifted. Senator Pierre.
Thank you. Everyone, Senator Pierre, P-I-E-R-R-E. Any sign of life, so when you're ready, be happy to begin. Good. Good. Is anyone not ready? Okay. Pia. Awesome. America at its best matches its commitment with its concern for civilization. America at its best knows that persistent poverty does not fulfill our nation's promise. But America at its worst is right now. As uncertainty permeates throughout the entirety of the United States, our people have truly been left behind. However, it's because a world without our intervention will plague our people even more. I beg everyone to affirm. Principally, this legislation restores public order. In the context of this scenario, there has been significant riots and protests in 19 different states, with people being dragged out of their homes, being mutilated in public, and even burning down buildings with valuable medical resources in the midst of COVID-19. With this in mind, this legislation best mitigates the problem with two very distinct ways. First, through sections 1A and 1B, which allow for the deployment of troops by suspending the Posse Comitatus Act. Senator Rodriguez tells us that by deploying troops, we essentially create an all-out war. His warrant for this argument was essentially that because there are high rates of gun ownerships, American lives will be put at risk. Here's the caveat. Our troops are fundamentally the best way to minimize the risk because our troops have the ability, when we pass this bill, to act in the same way as law enforcement. Understand, this has already been extremely effective. In fact, Blake Stillwell from We Are Mighty on May of 2019 explains, in the midst of the violent 1992 LA riots, we deployed the National Guard in conjunction with the Marines, which not only restored public order within 36 hours, but by the time the Guard withdrew, the crime rate in the nation or in the area had dropped by 70%. Similarly, as this nation is faced by active riots, we can replicate the same sort of effectiveness. The second way that we restore public order is through Section 1C, which allocates $1 million in humanitarian aid to help victims of violence. Remember the fact that facilities with ventilators and other valuable medical materials are being burned down due to public outrage. This means that there is a necessity to allocate aid to guarantee that livelihoods can be restored. The Center for Strategic and International Studies on March of 2020 shows why aid will be effective, showing that most of our military's medical capability is in the Army Reserve and can be mobilized easily. Let's put this in perspective. 15,000 Americans have already died. There is a necessity to mobilize our troops. Second, let's talk about the idea about retaliation from the public. Senator Kaiser and Senator Dorworth pretty much gave you the same argument. They tell you that we decrease citizen trust and propagate civil unrest because our military is deployed. Two caveats here. First, the negative has failed to interact with the idea that the military can actually bolster public trust because our troops do things like providing humanitarian assistance and providing logistics to law enforcement officers. But even if you don't buy that, let's issue a comparative. 15,000 Americans have already died. At the point in which the government literally does nothing, we lose even more trust because when people are literally losing their lives, trust in our system is absolutely depleted. Whether our servicemen are wearing camouflage or cargos, raising a flag or dropping it, they can lead us to the prospect of reconstruction. Devastation awaits us without their presence.
Okay, speech time 3 minutes and 12 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Okay, that will first go to Senator Moss.
Hey, Senator Pierre, so why are protesters angry?
They're mad because Nancy Pelosi just got into power.
So if we remove Nancy Pelosi from the White House, they won't be angry anymore, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so why don't we do that and save thousands of lives in the process instead of possibly starting a civil war?
Our executive branch is unfit to serve. That's why she stepped in.
So you don't think it's a worse problem, civil war versus 7 days without a president?
They aren't fit to serve, so legally they can't, meaning we have to wait. To mitigate the civil unrest now, we should deploy our troops.
But we could say they're fit to serve and just pass legislation. There's nothing actually stopping that from us from doing that.
From a deadly respiratory illness, they are not fit to serve.
Okay, they'll next go to Senator Rodriguez.
Let's go off that last line of questioning. The scenario said that they would require 14 days to recover, and it's already been 7 days. Why not just wait 7 more days and allow them to take power?
In 7 days, 15,000 Americans have died, 20,000 more have been injured.
And why is deploying troops to stop these conservatives any better?
Well, as the example I gave to you, during the LA riots, order was restored within 36 hours. That is
how are the murder rates in LA right now? Just out of curiosity.
During the time after the Guard withdrew, the crime rate dropped by 70%.
And I showed you evidence that showed 27% increase in murder because of our intervention. Why is this bill any different?
I proved a 7% drop in crime. That's the exact
questioning time has elapsed. Okay. Seeing as that was yes.
Exit chamber.
Yeah, just do it. You can go ahead. You don't really have to motion. You can just like turn your camera off and do whatever you got to do.
Okay. There's actually a question about like recency.
Yes.
I believe for the last questioning block, I should have gotten it based off precedence.
Let me check. Yeah, sorry about that.
All right.
I got you. I apologize. All right. I like tipped over my whole trash can, so like I like dropped everything. I was trying to do stuff. Sorry. All right. All right. We'll move on to the next speaker. Uh, negation speakers, please raise your placard. Okay, Senator Moss, you have the floor unopposed.
I thank the chair. That's Representative Moss, spelled M-O-S-S, speaking for the first time today. Assuming everyone's ready, I'll begin. We are facing the most deadly attack on American soil since the Civil War. 15,000 Americans, 15,000 men, women, and children simply trying to survive a pandemic have already been murdered in right-wing attacks. These attacks will only get worse. A January 2019 poll by the University of Maryland found that 1 in 5 Republicans believe that Democrats lack the traits to be considered fully human. And 13% of Republicans believe that violence would be justified in response to an electoral loss in 2020. Furthermore, Senator Rodriguez said Republicans have a lot of guns. And I'll quantify this. According to the Pew Research Center in 2017, 44% of Republicans own guns. Combining these statistics, approximately 2.9% of the American population, or 8,670,000 people, are Republicans who own guns and believe that violence is justified in order to take power from Democrats. Representatives, we are on the verge of civil war. Right now, we have a choice. We can choose, like Senator Gianluca proposes, the path of militancy. If we send the United States Army to quell protests, this conflict will no longer be about Nancy Pelosi acting as our temporary president. It will be about US soldiers killing Americans. There will be martyrs. There will be a civil war. Representative Pierre says the US military can quickly stop these riots, and he cites the example of the LA riots in 1992. However, according to Encyclopedia Britannica in April of 2020, less than 100 people died in the LA riots. Right now, already 15,000 people have died in these terrorist attacks. We cannot compare these two things. They are completely different. There is no precedence of the US military being able to put down such a revolt without massive war. The only precedent is the American Civil War. Furthermore, Representative Ambervon argues there is no way to assure that, argues that medical personnel will be deployed, not troops. However, there's no way to argue that will happen. Senator Pierre has already said that he would prefer troops to be deployed. And I think when we're saying military personnel, we're probably including military personnel and actually troops when we're saying that. At the end of the day, Representative Gianluca talked about the 1033 program. However, nowhere in this bill is the 1033 program mentioned. Gianluca says that doesn't matter because the moment our military is working with armed police forces, these police forces' weapons will be removed. However, there's no precedent for this. In fact, the 1033 program was put in place in 1990. And Encyclopedia Britannica in an April 2020 report says that in 1992, President Clinton dispatched 4,000 soldiers to quell the riots in Los Angeles, and he did not remove the 1033 program. So there's no precedent for that taking place. Overall, it's time we choose peace. It's time we just force Nancy Pelosi out of power and ensure all of these riots stop. It's time to avoid civil war.
Speech time of 3 minutes and 10 seconds. Thank you, Senator. All questioners, please raise your placards. Okay, that will first go to Senator Resnick.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Moss. When is the last time in our American history that riot police have incited a civil war?
That has never happened.
Okay, when
We've also never seen 15,000 deaths because of
the
riots.
last time that riot police actually had to take force against these types of riots and protests was in 1779, where even then the casualties were minimal. I can't understand why riot police would all of a sudden change that narrative.
Because there's already been 15,000 deaths. We have a militant force against us. This is unprecedented.
The morals of riot police completely cancel that argument.
Senator Medigovic.
Thank you. So it's not that just these radical conservative have guns, but a lot of the times law enforcement agencies, which are also radically conservative, will turn a blind eye, right?
Possibly.
Okay, so Have we ever revoked the 1033 program for specific law enforcement agencies?
You tell me.
We actually have several times. So at the point where they literally—
Why can't we revoke it for those law enforcement agencies without passing this bill? I don't see how one leads to the other.
Wouldn't you also need troops to ensure its actual efficacy and to demilitarize the remaining—
Then send troops for the sole purpose of enforcing 1033. That's not what this bill does.
Okay, question time has elapsed. Thank you, senators. The next speech is a negation. Negative speakers, please raise your placards. That will go to Senator Resnick, unopposed. You're on mute.
Representative Moss just speaking the affirmation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or he spoke the affirmation. Or negation, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Senator, did you have a speech in the affirmation?
I do.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna call again for AF speakers. All AF speakers, please raise your placards. Okay, that will go to Senator Resnick.
Thank you. Okay, that's Senator Resnick. Assuming my judges are ready, just an indication for my PO, and I'm ready to go. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and pin you just for efficiency purposes. Okay. Over the last few months, this Congress has discussed—
Jack needed a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What's up?
He needs a second.
Oh, okay, got you. You're good. It won't count against you. You'll be fine. Yeah. Okay, okay? I'm guessing he probably still needs a second.
Good to go. Okay, as am I.
Awesome.
Over the last few months, this Congress has discussed, passed, and failed legislation regarding COVID-19. But it was after I read this bill that I think I finally understand the reality of our situation. For far too long, this Congress has passed aid to our people, yet starved itself of sustenance policy. But it's under today's legislation that we finally change that narrative. The first reason you're going to pass this legislation is because the military systems we employ are more prepared than the state systems in the status quo. Realize that in regards to COVID-19, military operations have begun preparing responses that state-level organizations haven't found the time to consider, and that's because we're working with Northcom. But don't believe me, believe the Kaiser Family Foundation, which writes in March of 2020 that for domestic civil supports efforts, officers under this type of employment will be commanders of the U.S. North Command, or Northcom. That's extremely important because it's Northcom that's an integral ally when it comes to battling COVID-19 in the future. Chase Golightly from Arizona State University furthers on April 7th of 2020 that U.S. Northern Command is now leading the DoD in COVID relief efforts. However, this shouldn't be a surprise to this Congress because, as I've stated multiple times in this round, that following their deployment in major population centers like New York City, they effectively flattened their curve. So when Senator Rodriguez forebodes civil war, we must assume that he's speaking in hypotheticals because the reality of the situation is that in the past, we've seen these military personnel act effectively and appropriately. It's by passing this legislation that we not only combat today's scenario, but with precedented efficiency, but we also stop the crisis at its root. But the second reason that we pass today's legislation is because it improves infrastructural flaws simultaneously. Realize that under our current legislative circumstances, our lack of adequate infrastructure has become overwhelmingly apparent. And that is because, however, we combat this under this legislation because, as LaRue Mahan for the DoD explains, American forces deployed into underdeveloped countries have been responsible for major infrastructural efforts. For example, following the conflict in Iran, American troops were critical in rebuilding these countries. It's that universal characteristic that defined your affirmation ballot. Why? Because as Dylan Scott explains to the New York Times, states that lack the infrastructure to deal with the high caliber health crisis like COVID-19, they simply don't have the resources for healthcare workers, technology, or resources in order to minimize deaths in the situation of a statewide pandemic. Realize that when we deploy these troops domestically, not only do they stop violence and deliver aid, but they act as a pipeline that goes directly from the federal government to develop the infrastructure that's necessary to prevent a catastrophe like this from happening ever again. So when Senator Dorwith impacts education, realize that the bigger picture that we paint under the affirmation finally restores our social order. Don't starve our people of salvation.
Speech time, 3 minutes and 10 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Okay, that'll go to Senator Moss.
When we deployed military doctors under Northcom, were there massive riots and 15,000 murders?
Okay, Northcom, when I talk about Northcom under my type of argumentation, I'm talking about Northcom as its effectiveness under COVID-19 and its responses. I'm not sure how the doctor.
Right, but with COVID-19 and its responses, the situation was COVID-19, not riots and 15,000 murders, correct?
Okay, so we're looking at the bigger picture here, and if you look at the cause of the riots, the root cause of the riots, the thing that sprouted this entire violence, we're directly going at that root, and that's going to change the entire scenario.
Senator Umbravan.
Hi, Senator. So, Causa Comitatus was created to protect American rights, correct?
Can you repeat your question? I couldn't hear the beginning.
Causa Comitatus was created to protect American rights, right?
Yes.
So what does it tell our people if we suddenly go back to infringe on these rights?
Okay, well, if we're talking about large scale, like for the future, we're talking about peace relations, I would say that that's a much more important impact. And if you're weighing that invertedly, I think that you should invert as well.
So you're telling me that you're open to creating precedent that goes back on human rights?
We're not, no, because if you don't pass this legislation, you're only infringing on human rights even further because you're setting people up to be violently persecuted.
But what happens next time? Don't we set precedent that says we can...
Sorry, Senator Oriofe. I'm sorry, does Senator, questioning time has elapsed. I don't know why, I thought you had a question for some reason. Okay, speaking time has elapsed. Okay, do we have a speech in the negation? Speeches in the negation, please raise your placards. Okay, the chair highly frowns upon a one-sided debate. Do we have a speech in the affirmation? Okay, Senator Oriofe.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. This is Senator Oriofe. I'm speaking for the first time. One moment, I need to time myself. All right. Everyone's ready, right, Isaac? Are you serious? Our president and vice president are literally on their deathbed. Let that sink in. Everyone on the live stream and everyone in this chamber. 2 words. I know you've heard it, but you seem to fail to comprehend. Stay home. It's time for our unprecedented, hypocritical ideals to finally be set straight. We have divided amongst ourselves, amongst caste, creed, culture, and countries. But what is undivided remains most valuable, our humanity. Lives are at risk. Humanity is at risk. Vote in affirmation. I can't believe I have to say this, and I can't believe no one has said it before. You pass this legislation to stop the spread of the coronavirus. Every impact from Senator Rodriguez, who says people will fight back, to Representative Kaiser, who again says people will fight back, and to Representative Dortworth, who again says people will fight back, does not hold if those people are literally dying. People are ignoring social distancing rules to protest Nancy Pelosi. Therefore, cases are rising significantly. As Christine Zhao, a senior researcher at Newsweek quantifies, just last month, Kentucky reported the highest coronavirus infection increase after a week of protests. This is equal to a detrimental 10.6% increase. But now, what about the states that are actually going to be affected with today's legislation, specifically Florida, with more than half of this legislative chamber is actually from? As the Florida Department of Health contextualized the impacts just yesterday by telling us that after the gradual reopening of the number of known cases in Florida, cases of COVID-19 rose by 1,038, Understand that the elderly are disproportionately affected by the virus and realize that almost 13 million senior citizens live in states like Texas and Florida. The negation and these protests put them at risk the most. In the streets of these states, every turn you make, you see the gruesome face of hatred and supremacy. Listen to me and listen closely. Our death rate is rising. Pretty soon, if you fail this legislation, a person's life will be determined by a coin flip. Don't be the hand that flips it, and affirm. Next, we need to address every misconception that has run rampant throughout the course of today's debate, specifically on the topic of, is our military the best alternative? In fact, it is, because Section 1A ensures any army pressure from the aid is going to be put in the correct areas. The very first misconception on the negation starts with Representative Rodriguez when he tells us that our military will only increase conflict. That's not true. This is corroborated by Lindsey Conn at the Naval War College expert on the National Guard. When put together, the National Guard will help be filling whatever gaps civilian leaders identify. Listen to Mr. Rodriguez's solvency. He says, let's wait in the future. He's basically saying to stop people from dying in the end, let them die now. That doesn't make sense. I uphold civil liberties. Mr. Moss, you say the citizens will fight back. You're absolutely right. But when it's thousands of disadvantaged Americans, I honestly don't care as long as we're saving lives. In the end, amidst a pandemic, what I can agree on is that there is no right from wrong. Everyone has their own story, but make sure that that wrong decision does not end up in the history books, and affirm.
Thank you for that speech for 3 minutes and 9 seconds. Any and all questioners, please raise your placards. Okay. That will go to Senator Kaiser.
Hi, Senator. So it's not good to let people die now as opposed to dying later, but it's not good to let them die later as opposed to dying now, right?
No dying people. That's what I want.
Okay, and how do you accomplish that on the affirmation?
I mean, in the end, it's all about weighing. In the affirmation, if you have military pressure, you're going to be able to decrease the amount of increase the amount of lives saved.
But if that conflict is going on because the military is deployed, we're going to.
Okay, but if the military isn't deployed, more people are going to die.
Okay.
But if the military,
Senator Dorworth. Senator Dorworth.
Okay, so you talk about how less people are going to die without the expansion of our military, but if, let's say, someone in the army personnel has coronavirus, and they're using their physical force to detain people, wouldn't they just be spreading the coronavirus even more?
Yes, that's true. Exactly. But what I'm saying, no. But the logic behind it is that these people are like leaving their homes, therefore contracting coronavirus, right? But if you implement our military and stop the amount of people that are socially interacting, then coronavirus gets decreased.
And using physical force, like wouldn't that
I mean, they don't have to use physical force. You don't have to
just shut down the place that they're trying to riot.
Questioning time has elapsed. I apologize. And it seems we have an update here, I'm just getting this now. Apparently, a member of the Senate has officially tested positive for COVID-19 after the presentation of our next remaining cases, unfortunately, concerning this piece of legislation. The CDC has recommended that the Senate actually immediately adjourn after the remaining speakers without a vote. It seems someone really important in the Senate has possibly contracted this, meaning no floor vote can occur on this piece of legislation. We will allow the two other speakers to present their cases, but this is an interesting development. I'm very concerned by this, but it looks like we'll have to go straight to adjournment, and we will have a recess considering that we cannot have a floor vote. But I will allow the next two speakers to present their cases, as we do want a full and complete debate, but we do want to get out of here as soon as possible to avoid contracting any more viruses from this concerning news. Okay, so we're going to move on. The next speaker, I'm going to call again, seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation. Speeches in the negation, please rise. Please place up your placards. Okay, so the chair highly frowns upon a one-sided debate, but I will allow the two remaining cases. Do we have any speeches in the affirmation? Okay, Senator Shirokova, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm just going to pin the PO, so could you let me know when everyone's ready? Okay. Unprecedented times have called for unprecedented measures. Look where we are now. Regardless, I understand the importance of the sacrifice everyone has made for the purpose of the quarantine. But the most desperate situations call for the most desperate measures. It's because sending troops to all these states is actually the best possibility for ensuring safety that I am so proud to affirm. First, pass to save lives. Almost every speech on the negation has discussed the possibility of increased conflict. Now, Representative Oriofe already touched upon this, but let me further his argument by noting that this is entirely non-unique, because Business Insider reported just last month that additional troops have been sent to the Mexican border to allow for the screening of coronavirus cases. It doesn't matter whether we pass this bill or not, because either way, there are already troops working in these states. Not to mention, these protesters are inciting this conflict themselves by going out to public places, peeling the masks off of citizens in stores, and dragging people out of their homes. There is conflict right now, and it will only accelerate if we do not pass. So we must take action. 15,000 people have died. It is so urgent that we send these troops now, because if we don't, more equipment will be destroyed, and more of our people will be injured and killed. I admit, it isn't a perfect world either way, and there will be risks whether we pass or not. But by failing this bill, you are ensuring deaths. By passing, you are ensuring that we're saving lives. We have the opportunity to save thousands of lives right now, so why don't we take it? But second, let's address the mayhem that is the negation. Senator Rodriguez and Dorworth, our citizens are dying right now. We have two options. Either we sit back and watch, or we take action and prevent the number of deaths from growing even more. Sending in troops will not incite more violence, it will actually mitigate it. So we have no choice but to pass. Senator Moss, we cannot just replace Nancy Pelosi. The members of the executive branch right now are suffering from a severe respiratory disease, and someone needs to serve. Furthermore, if she is replaced with someone who appeals more to these if she is replaced by someone who appeals more to these protesters, it doesn't matter who has the executive responsibility, because there will always be a group of people who is upset. If we pick a Republican, the Democrats will be, and vice versa. We have the fortune to be at the end of this debate from the safety of our homes. But that is the exact opposite for the victims of the protests out there. At least give them the chance to live.
Speech time of 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Any questioners, please raise your placards. Okay, that'll first go to Senator. Okay, let me look here. That'll go first to Senator Amravarn.
Hi, Senator. So I'm having a little trouble understanding your argument. So why won't sending in troops incite violence?
It won't incite violence because, this has already been done in the past. Like, they're literally doing it right now, and it hasn't been inciting violence.
But aren't the protesters armed and violent?
Yes.
So how can we put two armed groups against each other without expecting violence?
No, we aren't putting them against each other. We're just sending troops to ensure that there is safety and that they don't do this anymore. We're not saying that we're going to be attacking these protesters.
But there still is a risk of more violence, isn't there?
I already said in my speech, yes, there is always the risk. There would be a risk if we pass or we don't. But honestly, I think it's the better choice to actually pass, because these troops can ensure that there will be less deaths.
Senator Oriofe. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, no, my
there
mute button was tripping. Okay.
There you go. You're
so
good.
Is there aggression in the status quo?
Yes.
Okay, so how can you stop aggression? With aid? How is medical aid going to stop aggression?
Medical aid could stop aggression. Okay, what do you mean?
Okay, so you're saying that the military won't have to be aggressive and you won't have to fight. How can you stop people from killing each other by giving them medical aid? How does that work?
Okay, well, I'm not saying that we're going to be, I'm saying that there is conflict right now. So there is obviously so much aggression. I already just told you this, but if we send troops, we can actually mitigate that.
So the troops are going to have to.
Right.
I'm sorry, question time has elapsed. Okay. Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, I'm going to call for speeches in the negation. Negation speakers, please raise your placards. Okay, I'm assuming none. Seeing that, speeches in the affirmation, please raise your placards. Senator Blackwell, you stand unopposed.
I thank the chair that Senator Blackwell is speaking for the first time in this session. Judges and PO, please give me a nod or a smile when you're ready. Americans on different sides in violent confrontation over the direction of these United States. This theme is present throughout our history, no more so than in 1861 at the start of the Civil War. a war which claimed 625,000 lives. We may see similar numbers soon, but we can change this. The greatest military in the history of the world, the US, must show strength. We need peace through strength to triumph. But first, you must affirm because the US Army is the most powerful on the planet, suitable to face a threat like this one. Senator Rodriguez tells us that we're on the brink of war, and I simply agree, but we need a strong force to combat this. We can rise to the challenge. Let's begin on July 28, 1932, when President Herbert Hoover ordered the Army to disperse the World War I veterans and their families to demand early cash redemption of their service certificates. While Hoover was criticized for being aggressive with troops on the ground, there was no humanitarian aid sent to make up for it. This legislation we have before us will end the issue at hand in the meantime, and the aid will ensure that no one is seriously hurt by our actions in the long run. Earlier this month, in Columbus, Ohio, hundreds of protesters without face masks brought guns into the state capitol building. While they have the right to gather, they do not have the right to openly threaten those in high office. We have just received notice in this Congress that one member in the Senate has contracted COVID-19. This is why we need strong defense to protect these protesters from causing this, because at the end of the day, anyone is susceptible to this virus. What is unfolding in states like Alabama as we speak is not the America we know. But USA Today tells us in May 2016 that Alabama is the #1 easiest state to purchase a firearm, according to their list. This is a recipe for disaster. In Gallup polling, hundreds of Americans were asked to rate the honesty of numerous professions. Military members finished at the top of the list, next to healthcare workers. And isn't it ironic that these two professions are at the front lines of this hidden war? Senator Dorff claims that this bill will cause civil unrest, but that is where the $1 million in aid comes in. If we salute those in uniform, let's show it. Throughout America, conflict is raging. Catherine Morris from Harvard University in January 2020 tells us that nearly 6 in 10 Americans agree that there will be protest or rioting in the US over the next year in response to how the country is being run. With this insanity perpetuating across the nation, our military needs to be in place to keep our people in check. In fact, Newsweek tells us in March 2020 that the US military is already making plans to stop civil disturbances amid the coronavirus pandemic, something we have not seen for 30 years. Senator Kaiser, this is not a political protest, and you cannot perceive it to be that way. This is domestic terrorism. Abraham Lincoln once said in the midst of the Civil War, "If there is a worse place than hell, I am in it." This is one of the darkest periods in our nation's history. As we always do, we will triumph over this together, 6 feet apart.
Question time of 3 minutes and 12 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Okay, that'll first go to Senator Shirkova.
Hi, Senator. So are we going to be sending these troops to violently harass these protesters?
No, we are not. We're sending these troops to be on the ground. Well, we might use some force if it's necessary. Like I said, people are having guns. So if people are using guns, we're going to show enough force. But at the same time, we're going to bring aid as well.
Okay, yes. Okay, I agree. So what would happen if we actually don't take action?
If we don't take action, we're heading towards a civil war, as many of those on our side have suggested already.
Okay, Senator Resnick.
Hi. Okay,
Hi.
So I have a question about one of the data sources you cited. So you said that, okay, that's part of the question. What side of the party believes that the military personnel are trustworthy? Democrats or Republicans?
Mostly Democrats, I would say so, but I'm sure a few Republicans would agree with that.
Okay, so I'm going to have to disagree with the logic of that statement because Democrats normally want demilitarization and Republicans are in support of the military. So what happens when we then turn the Republicans against the military?
Yes, but Democrats still respect the military and its job. And at the same time, Republicans are the ones who are in the streets protesting over this.
Okay, question time has elapsed. My apologies.
I think the chair.
All right. Considering a new update, it seems that the names of the senators have been released. It seems Senator Chuck Schumer from New York and Senator McConnell have fallen ill from the coronavirus. Both majority and minority leader have fallen ill, allowing no House vote or no floor vote on today's piece of legislation, unfortunately. We pray that they will recover soon, but considering the news, we have decided that it is not appropriate to have a floor vote at this time. And during the Senate proceedings concerning today's piece of legislation to end the mayhem, members of the House of Representatives have actually been watching C-SPAN via their homes and are now considering taking emergency action of their own. Representative Lil Huddy has proposed similar legislation looking to nullify the Posse Comitatus Act and deploy troops to the 19 states with the riots. I think we're going to have a recess here for 5 minutes, 5-minute recess. Please take your time and consider this new update, please.
Wait, I'm confused. Is there another bill that they have to do?
There might be. I would actually recommend that everyone stay on for just a second.
Okay, like, is everyone giving another speech is what I'm asking.
I believe so.
Okay, got it.
I'm really glad that we can all reconvene now on a platform where I don't have to wear pants. It's really futuristic, and I really love it. It's just amazing to be a congressman at this time. Well, welcome everyone. I know last month we could not have a floor vote on the piece of legislation we considered, but now that we're all together, it turns out that the House of Representatives actually convened to address the riots occurring nationwide, and a week ago, they had actually decided, after careful consideration, to actually pass Representative Lil Huddy's piece of legislation to nullify the Posse Comitatus Act indefinitely and deploy our troops to the 19 states without riots. So considering that the House of Representatives have essentially passed our version of the Senate bill, we are now going to consider this piece of legislation that they have passed. 1 week after the COVID-19 outbreak in the Senate and the passage of the House bill, the following has occurred as a result of the House nullifying the Posse Comitatus Act. This is the results of the House now taking our action, basically. The Posse Comitatus Act has been repealed. The number of states with riots has been reduced to 8. This is largely due to the dismantling of the radical action by the U.S. military. Rioters in multiple states have accused U.S. military officials of name-calling, beatings, and those engaging in beating those engaging in the Pelosi protests. They argue that military officials have continued to do this because it is of their contrasting political beliefs. President Pelosi and the federal government have continued to argue that the federal government's officials ought to be trusted. Many news outlets have tried to ask about the riots, have been ignored during the government press briefings. During our press briefings, we've seen a lack of distrust of the press and a general hostility towards them. As a response to this news, the Senate has proposed the following responsive piece of legislation. And that piece of legislation will be sent out in a remind for all of you to read. You will have a 20-minute recess. During this recess, you will write a speech, and we will consider the action that you want us to take, and hopefully we get a good debate on the next piece of legislation considering that. Senator Dorth, do you have a question?
So like, will the bill, like in its format and everything, be posted on the remind?
Yes, it will be posted, and you'll get to see that. Does anyone have any questions about the update? Senator Resnick.
Senator Van Cree, are you expecting a whole debate?
Obviously, I expect it. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. I don't know. I can't say that for sure, but you guys will have 20 minutes. You guys will have to, you guys can write a speech. It can be Senator Rodriguez.
So will everyone who wants to speak get the opportunity to speak, or will the round be cut early?
No, everyone who wants to speak will get the opportunity to speak.
Cool.
On the scenario, is there any update of how President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence are doing medically?
President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence are still in the hospital recovering. It seems that in the time that they have been in the hospital, that their condition has remained stable, yet not well enough to be released from the hospital.
Cool, thank you.
And your 20 minutes begins now, by the way.
Was the speech sent out? I don't see it.
Let me check.
Yeah, it's updated in what they sent before. Like they updated that doc.
Cool, thank you.
Yep, you guys can check that out. Yep. All right. All right, I'm gonna ask. He's saying he's gonna fight me. Okay, I'm gonna ask everyone to come back on if you can hear me. I'd honestly prefer if we didn't redo recency. Okay, so just as a update of where we are, we're going to proceed very shortly. Okay. All right, and by the way, guys, recency does reset, so we're gonna continue on with a different set of recency. So
I have a question. Oh, where in the timeline are we? Like, are we in the present or like a month from now?
yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are we resetting speaking order?
I think so. Let me get an update on that because we need to consult about that. All right, yep. Recency is resetting, guys. All right, and hopefully I'm just gonna ask that if the judges are here, can you guys just like give me a visual that you guys are here, just so I know. You're here, cool, cool. See Tina and Weston. I don't know if I saw anyone else. Oh, hi, Sydney. Cool. Now I will be giving my speeches.
Is speaking order resetting or no?
Yes, speaker's order is resetting.
Do we have a lot of people here? Could we get a split potentially? You guys could type out your side on the chat in the chat. I'm not good at counting. In the chat, it's 5-5, right? I think. Maybe. That makes sense.
Okay, we're gonna get started here soon. I'm just gonna take a quick roll. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm just gonna get a quick roll call. Do we have Medigovic? Okay, Rodriguez. Okay, Ambravan. Cool. Kaiser. Cool. Morales. Cool. Dorworth. Awesome. Pierre. Moss. Got you. Resnick, saw her, and Oriofe, got you. Shri Okova, got you, and Blackwell, got you. Okay, so we have all the competitors, we have all the judges. I think we're ready to get started. Considering the update, with the new update in mind, do we have any other questions before we begin?
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
So looking at the second piece of legislation, I know that y'all can probably see it's pretty similar to the first piece of legislation. Just for the purposes of evaluating rehash, I just want to say that I'm considering the first debate's arguments on this legislation as if like we're on a continuous flow going into the second piece of legislation. So I don't just want to hear the same arguments regurgitated again, because that's basically effectively rehash in this context.
Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions? Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay, so we're going to begin on the piece of legislation that is now being considered by this virtual Congress. Do we have a sponsor? Please raise your placard. Senator Ambravan, you have the floor.
I think the chair. That's Senator Ambravan, Ambravan. I'm assuming the judges are ready and any indication from the PO, and I will be happy to begin. The phrase "a thin blue line" refers to the position of police in society as the force which holds back chaos. But today it seems as though this line has snapped in half, ensuring chaos runs rampant in our legislature. Let's mend the impression of our nation and protect the constituents we represent and affirm this new legislation. Because first, military personnel have been overstepping their role where police should be involved. At this point, the Army has been infringing on the everyday lives of our constituents by acting as law enforcement officers, and this is fully and completely out of line. The CSIS in 2020 explains that soldiers are heavily armed and taught to regard the population as threats. Police officers are lightly armed, on the other hand, and are trained to protect the citizenry. Using soldiers for law enforcement entails the risk of abuse and misunderstanding. The increased cooperation between the police and the military has blurred the line between two traditionally distinct organizations. Whereas soldiers must attack and defeat an enemy, police officers are charged with not only protecting the community from lawbreakers, but also protecting the constitutional rights of those alleged lawbreakers that they arrest. Where soldiers are trained to inflict only maximum damage in situations, police officers have a duty to use minimum force. And the image of our nation is being destroyed in the status quo. We're not affirming rights when the government is perpetuating violence and killing civilians. So let's stop the death, especially protecting the right to protest, and affirm this legislation. Police have always been a symbol of protection and civil liberties, but our misuse of force has turned the streets red with blood. But next, reinstating the Pase Comitatus Act does not leave us vulnerable during future times of emergency. The whole reason that the act was repealed in the first place was due to the fact that we are in a time of dire emergency. However, this was wholly unnecessary, which is why we must reinstate it. according to the Lewis and Clark Law Review in 2006. Although there are numerous limitations to the PCA, its importance is in preventing the use of the military as law enforcement in everyday life. When a disaster such as a flu pandemic or massive hurricane devastates the entire American city, the statutory and constitutional exceptions to the PCA allow the armed forces to respond to the disaster. So we repealed this app because of the extenuating circumstances that we are facing the status quo, but understand that the initial legislation was completely unnecessary. And if this happens again, we won't be vulnerable even if we do reinstate the PCA. The United States Congress has enacted a number of exceptions to these general prohibitions that allow the military in certain situations to assist civilian law enforcement agencies in enforcing the laws of the United States. So understand that we don't have to remove troops even if we do reinstate the PCA. So let's affirm today to ensure that the thin blue line will always be a phrase used to inspire pride and honor worthy sacrifices.
Okay. Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 6 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. I'll first go to Senator Oriofe.
Hello, considering you're the sponsor of this legislation, what's the further resolve clause?
So the further resolve clause of this legislation is that Congress denounces President Pelosi.
No, the first one, I'm sorry. It's basically saying that all troops are going to be recalled. If all troops are recalled, doesn't that mean that we're going to be stopping the spread of aid because the troops were the ones that were giving aid?
So my whole point, my second contention was about if an emergency situation does come in the future, then we still can supply troops to
But there's still almost like 8 states that needs help. Why take away?
Senator Morales.
Hey, Senator, great speech. So originally when we started the entire situation, how many states were being affected by these riots?
I think 19.
And how many are being affected as of right now after we passed?
8.
So why should we pass this legislation and ruin all of our progress?
Because this legislation even brings up the fact that military officials are justifying beating and killing.
I understand, but when we weigh the impacts and actually put it out, haven't we seen?
Questioning time. Oh, I'm sorry. There's an authorship, so there's still Senator Medigovic.
Hi there. Have casualties decreased?
I'm not sure.
They have, because it's reduced in 11 states and it's now down to only 8 from 19.
Yes.
So how can you say that our troops have no agency?
So, okay, first of all, I'm saying even if we do pass this legislation, that doesn't mean we have to repeal troops because like my evidence said, in emergency situations under the PCA, we can still supply troops to these different states.
Wait, it explicitly says that we recall all troops. So does this now just let every single insurgency in the remaining states flourish?
But that doesn't change the fact.
Senator Moss.
So if we remove troops and these insurgencies suddenly continue and increase, then aren't we going to have to put troops back into these states?
Sure, and even if we pass this legislation, we still can.
Yes, but if we have to put them back in these states in the future, isn't it only going to be harder for these troops to put down the riots, leading to more police brutality and military brutality?
So what I'm saying, first of all, is that the military officials are overstepping their lines because they're not supposed to be acting as law enforcement officers. That's the job of our police.
Question time has elapsed. Thank you, Speaker. Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, negative speakers, please raise your placards. Negative speakers, I call. Please raise your placards. I thought we had some negative speeches. I'm going to call again, negative speeches. Okay, I mean, I believe we had some negative speeches, but I'm guessing we're more one-sided on this issue. So seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, I'm just going to call for another speech in the affirmation. AF speakers? Do we have no AF speakers either? Wasn't it a 5-5 split? I thought I saw that like in the
motion for a one
thing.
House recess.
Okay, do we have any seconds? Okay, I'm just gonna assume yes. Okay, I'm just gonna unanimously call for 1 minute recess. You guys have 1 minute.
Just as a note, if y'all can turn your attention to the chat really quickly, because some of your judges are speaking to you about the importance of having a speech prepared for early as well as late round, and that's something that you guys should definitely be considering.
Can I ask you guys a question? Do any of you have part of a speech ready and are just preparing it? Okay.
I could give a negation speech in like a minute.
Okay. I have an
A minute is like up, so if you guys want to take like another 1 minute recess, I'd entertain that motion. Okay, I'm just gonna unanimously, under my discretion, just call for another 1 minute recess. So you guys have just another minute.
Okay, Senator Moss. If you have a negation speech that you're getting ready, do you want to give it so we can have a fair debate, and then I'll finish with an affirmation? Perfect.
I just like ate like a half a cheesesteak in like 5 seconds. I'm really proud of myself. If I can eat a cheesesteak in 5 minutes, you guys can prep speeches in 3 minutes.
Good job, Isaac.
Thank you.
That's such a
appreciate that.
good precedent to create, Isaac. That's just the benchmark for achieving in life.
Yeah. Thank you, Weston. I am so Philly. Okay. And also 1 minute is about up. So I'm going to call for negation speakers. Negation speakers, please place up your placards. Okay, Senator Moss.
I thank the chair. That's Representative Moss speaking for the second time today on the negation. Is everyone ready? Assuming everyone is, I'll begin. So we put these troops in the region. We put them in America. We put them to stop these protests. And what happened? The protests stopped. That's the key fact that we're missing in this debate. We succeeded. The amount of states that are experiencing a protest have decreased from 19 to 8. This inherently means that we have been successful. And for the entire debate in the last round, when the negation was repeatedly talking about how we're going to have a civil war if we put troops in the region, this simply has not played out. There is no civil war happening right now. The only thing that has occurred is we have decreased the amount of death, is that we have decreased the amount of protests, is that we have effectively created peace. Now Representative Ambravan authors a piece of legislation that would effectively destroy all of this progress. She authors a piece of legislation that would remove every single one of the troops that we have put into these states and ensure that we no longer have the ability to stop these protests. I want you to look to Encyclopedia Britannica in April of 2020, where they explained that in the Los Angeles protests in 1992 that Representative Pierre discussed last round, we saw 2,300 people injured. That's 2,300 people that needed healthcare that only the military right now can provide. We need to continue providing aid in this region, and we need to continue ensuring that we can stop these horrible protest riots from continuing to take place. And then Representative Ambravan talks about military personnel overstepping bounds. And I would like to challenge this argument because we saw 15,000 Americans murdered? How is killing murderers? How is waging a war, killing the people that are literally murdering Americans, overstepping our bounds to any extent? That's not a misuse of force, and that's not a precedent we want to set. When Americans, or when anyone is directly threatening the lives of their fellow Americans, the military needs to stand up for them. We need to ensure that we are not ignorant to American people's suffering. And we need to ensure that the progress that we already have made is not withheld. We need to ensure that in these states where the protests are still remaining, it doesn't get worse. Furthermore, understand that if we suddenly leave this region, there's nothing stopping these protests from getting worse, and that's going to lead to our military having to go back into the region to put down these protests. And that's only going to lead to more of what Representative Ambervon calls brutality. It's only going to lead to more death, and it's only going to lead to more war. Overall, don't stop the progress that we have already made. Ensure that we protect our Americans, that we protect our country, and we protect our future. Negate this bill.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 2 seconds. Questioners, please raise up your placards. That will first go to Senator Ambervon.
I think the chair. Hi, Senator. So would you rather have protests or people being brutally killed by our own military?
I would rephrase it, because these protesters killed 15,000 people. I define that more of a terrorist group
But
than
why would anyone trust our government when they know it won't hesitate to use force against our people?
I think if someone's murdering 15,000 Americans, the military needs to stand up and kill that person and kill
Are
that
you
group.
saying that you agree in setting precedent?
Senator Rodriguez.
Hi, so is every conservative protester a rioter?
No.
But isn't our military like indiscriminately attacking all conservative protesters?
That was never said. Our military was simply accused of brutality.
The scenario doesn't specifically say we're targeting rioters. It only says we're specifically targeting conservatives who don't disagree with their political beliefs. Doesn't that open up abuse for our military?
The scenario never said that. It simply said rioters have accused us of killing.
It never specifically said rioters. It simply said
says rioters in section 2 of the scenario. Read
Okay.
the second bullet point.
Sorry. Are there any further questioners? Okay, seeing Senator Rodriguez, would you like that block? Sure, you're good to
Yeah,
go.
why not? So the second part of the scenario simply says we're targeting conservative protesters who disagree with political beliefs, not necessarily rioters. How do we know we're...
Can we just read that section real quick? It says rioters in multiple states have accused U.S. military officials of name-calling and beating those engaged in the Pelosi protests. It says rioters have done this. So don't you think the rioters are going to say that this is what's happening because it's what we're
Give me 1 second so I can find the spot that I'm looking for. I apologize.
Yeah, look to the second bullet point right there. That's where
that wasn't the part I was looking at. The part I was looking at is the part where
I'm sorry,
that
Senator. Are there any further questions, Senator Dorworth?
Okay, so that you argue that our military efficiency has been like working so far, but in the resolution itself, it says that meanwhile we've reduced the amount of states that are rioting to 8. We have still not like completely reduced any of the other ones. We haven't.
It's been 1 week. I think we need to give our military a chance.
That we have currently. So my question is like, we actually are still failing in those 8 states. So what is like the big, if we're failing at military, what's the big deal?
But it's only been 1 week. I mean, what kind of war ends in 1 week? We need to give our military a chance here.
I thought it was a month.
Okay, question time has elapsed. Questioning time has elapsed, and we move on to the next speaker. Negation speakers, please raise your placards. Affirmation speakers, please raise your placards. That'll go to Senator Resnick unopposed.
Point of personal privilege.
Yeah.
Exit chamber.
Yeah, but just stay on the call though. Don't like leave the call. Just hit mute and take off your video. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
That's Senator Resnick again. Assuming my judges are ready. Any indication from the PO? Perfect. Okay. Close my door. Watching the last debate, it became clear to me how little frequency we hold in past events and how simply irrespected they are oftenly. So, in order to reframe this debate, I'd actually like watching the last debate, it became clear to me that past events simply aren't respected in our chamber. So I'm going to instead allow Allow me to paint you our future so that you too will pass this legislation. The first thing that we need to realize is that the current state of our military is inexcusable. However, this argument is more than as Senator Abraham impacts. Realize that this is a matter of quality of our troops. The New York Times explains in September of 2018 that more than 2/3 of young adults don't qualify physically to join the military, and that has forced the Army to soften admissions. Realize that the state of our military simply can't withstand the hostility that our country is current in, especially during the scenario that we're currently debating. And that's because it will only lead to either fracturing of itself or fracturing of our nation altogether. This is especially important because, as the Brookings Institute points out in September of 2018, the use of highly developed technology in military procedures has become of the utmost importance within the military. Realize that very plainly, the military has lost its humanity, whether you want to blame it on the scenario that we've imposed or basically toxic masculinity, whatever you choose to blame it on the military. Realize that it has lost its humanity. And when we're under a type of scenario in which lives are put at risk, this isn't the time for the military to dehumanize. We need to realize that it's not just under the scenario, but it's overall affecting our country. So realize that when you pass this legislation, you stand with our people and you stand with humanity, and that's an impact that I will always agree with. The second reason that we need to pass this legislation is because we finally restore democracy under an already unstable time. Realize that we're actually going to return to an accurate representation, and that was something that we kind of gave away in the last session because we were prioritizing lives. But after today's debriefing, we've seen that it actually hurt lives. So we need to realize that we need to return back to democracy. And we do that because, as Robbie Suave explains for the Washington Post, perpetual war that violates the Constitution, rule of law, and democratic principle leads to people generally turning away from the government. And that leads to an impact that's of the utmost importance, especially during the COVID outbreak. And that's because it creates governmental mistrust, which means that citizens are less likely to adhere to CDC recommendations. And that's because when we create a culture in which people are failed by their government, whether it be discrimination, being attacked by their own military, we create a people that doesn't trust their government. Therefore, they're not willing to trust them in future references. And that's because during the COVID outbreak, it's especially important that they trust their government because we're in such an unsteady time. It's important that this Congress continues to remember its past. And I've chosen to acknowledge the mistakes that I made last session, but it's also even more important that we make an effort to attempt to knit back the shambles that we created.
Okay, thank you for that speech of 3 minutes. All questioners, please raise their placard. Senator Moss.
So rioters killed 15,000 people. Now the rioters have been stopped in 11 states. I'm missing how we haven't just saved lives.
Okay, of course we've saved lives, but I think that it's irresponsible for this Congress to all of a sudden think that it's okay that these military personnel are now disrespecting lives as well. They're also killing people as well. You're completely forgetting that.
They're killing terrorists.
But they're killing people. And also, when did we acknowledge that they were terrorists?
I think people that have been killing 15,000 Americans for political reasons are right-wing terrorists.
Okay, fine.
Senator Medigovic.
Thank you. So I'm really unclear. Why is the most powerful military in the world incapable to placate an insurgency?
Okay, I mean, we're looking at it. The scenario that we've seen, they've obviously mishandled their resources, and that's what makes them incapable.
But didn't Mr. Moss just tell you we've saved countless lives? Like, this is a very clear example of efficacy.
Concerning because so many of us are valuing the lives that we've saved, but completely ignoring the humanitarian rights that we're destroying. And that sets a dangerous precedent.
Okay, so in a power vacuum where now rioters don't have to deal with our troops, won't they just go back to being oppressors?
Not necessarily. After we've seen killings, you would think that there'd be some type of impact.
Questioning time has elapsed. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to the next speaker. Negation speakers, please raise your placards. Negation speakers. Senator Morales, you have the floor unopposed. Thank you.
That's Senator Morales speaking for the second time in this legislative session. Just a simple nod, heads up when you're ready, and I'll be more than happy to get. Okay.
Jack just needs 1 second. Mr. Fitzgerald just needs 1 second. He'll let us know in the chat when he's ready. You're good to go.
1 week ago, our Congress sat in these very seats and assembled here in order to protect the very prosperity of our people. And we failed them and betrayed our moral obligations as United States senators. But while today's legislation may seem like a solution with a blind eye, let me actually make it crystal clear for you and make you understand that passing serves to be a brave mistake. So hence we negate. But now first, let's fail today's legislation because what we have to understand is that we have already seen great progress in the status quo when it comes to our main priority, responding and solving these riots in our American streets. And Senator Resnick champions the idea in itself. But actually, let me refer to Senator Moss when he touches on this, but let's framework the project for our chamber exactly. In a span of 7 days, we have successfully reduced the numbers of states with riots from 19 to 8. We have reduced them half. Within a span of 7 days, hundreds and thousands of lives were saved. We have to understand this and always put our people's prosperity over any policy. So that's why we have to negate. So Senator Resnick, I 100% agree. It's time to acknowledge our mistakes and not make the same mistakes again with a vote in the negation. But now let's go to something that Senator Resnick also said again that I directly want to mention. She champions the whole idea on how PCAs actually serve to be beneficial in the status quo. But let me stand here once again and actually remind today's chambers on the common misconceptions of the PCA being effective as a whole, and remind everyone that the act actually doesn't even serve to apply in several situations. The Naval History and Heritage Command explains it best when on November 20th of 2017, they directly explained that the armed forces, when in performance of their military responsibilities, are beyond the reach of PCAs and its statutory and regulatory supplements. The act is limited to willful misuse of the Army or Air Force. The ideals on which the PCA was established have been eroded by increased public trust in military and judicial military acts. A vote in the negation is a vote for the people, and that's what we have to understand in the status quo. But now, if we don't want to take my word for it, then let's go back to the Heritage Foundation, where they actually put these impacts even more, and they actually go into statutory exceptions when it comes to PCA. Over years that it's passed, a fairly extensive array of particularized statutes, like those permitting the president to call armed forces, haven't actually worked in the status quo. So Senator Resnick, when you come up here and champion the whole idea of PCAs, understand that in the status quo, even before, they weren't even working. So when we pass this legislation, we get nowhere closer to reform. So yes, the future of our country is in our hands, but it is time to put practical policy over political posturing and fail today's legislation.
Thank you for that speech of 2 minutes and 58 seconds. All questioners, please raise their placards. Okay, that'll first go to Senator Senator Pierre.
Thank you. So what's the reason all this conflict happened in the first place?
So once Nancy Pelosi was put as president, there was a division between the political parties.
Right. Radical Republicans began to riot. Under one of the further resolve clauses, we denounce Pelosi as our leader. Why doesn't that stop the riots immediately?
Well, essentially, I don't even want that to be a possibility because it currently makes no sense. We don't even know if there's something reliable to come.
Are you saying you don't want the riots to stop? If it happened because she was put in power.
I'm 100% saying that I want the riots to stop, but that's not.
Senator Blackwell.
Senator, you state that the PCA has limited powers when it comes to the military, correct?
Yeah.
So isn't it the Army's job to take the place of police in this situation?
Well, no, Senator. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, could you explain further what you're trying to say?
Okay, so essentially what I'm trying to say is with this limited government, armies which actually go and we've been sending to, what I'm trying to say is that this progression has actually worked in the status quo. So when we pass this legislation, what we do is we get rid of our...
Sorry, questioning time has elapsed. Okay, negation speakers, please raise up your placards. Negation speakers. Do we have anyone on the negation? Affirmation? Okay, sorry. Sorry, those on the affirmation, please rise.
Isaac?
Yeah.
When you called for negs and like you went over, I raised my placard.
Oh, my apologies. Okay, Senator Medigovic.
Wait, just a really quick question. That was a neg speech, and you didn't call for aff speeches.
I heard that wrong then. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm just a little confused about that.
I'm sorry?
So the last speech was a neg speech, and then you called for a second neg speech.
Oh, so yeah, affirmation speakers. That's what I'm calling for. Affirmation speakers, please raise your placards. Is there anyone in the affirmation either? Senator Pierre, you have the floor, unopposed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Everyone, Senator Pierre, P-I-E-R-R-E. Again, any sign of life, so when you're ready, be happy to begin. Great. Is anyone not ready? Yeah. Awesome. On the precipice of America's Reconstruction in the late 19th century, the Military Reconstruction Act brought about vast uncertainty. For decades, this nation was fractured simply for differences in ideology. Today, history seems to be repeating itself. As our nation is muddled with ideological differences and thousands of lives are at risk, we have to put forth the best solution. It's because this legislation best puts forth hope, best restores hope back to the people. I'm so proud to affirm. Pass this legislation for one overarching reason, to immediately quell the violence. There are 3 reasons why that occurs. First, under the first resolve clause, we reinstate the Posse Comitatus Act. Right now, because Representative Huddy's legislation was passed, the stipulations under the Posse Comitatus Act have been lifted, making it to where our troops have had the authority to do just about anything. However, when you pass and reinstate the PCA, it shifts the role of the military at a time in which riots are completely running rampant. The benefit of this is explained by The Hill on March 20th of 2020, which explains that with the Posse Comitatus Act reinstated, exactly what we do when we pass this legislation, troops can bring extraordinary logistics and personnel surge capabilities to bear on the nationwide COVID-19 response, helping to foster cooperation with law enforcement agencies. What that means is that even in the worst case scenario, that riots still ensue, we can still have cooperation and continue to foster safety with National Guards in place. The second key way that we solve this is by recalling troops under the further resolve clause. In the context of this scenario, our troops have seized riots in 11 out of 19 states that were enduring protests. Senator Morales told us that this was over a period of 7 days, but in reality, it was actually over a month. Yet for the states that remain, the public has actually begun to skepticize just how effective our troops have been, and they've begun to accuse the military of atrocious abuses. Jonathan Mamolo from the Woodrow Wilson School of International Affairs at Princeton University on September 11th of 2018 explains why that's so dangerous, showing that militarization reduces public support for police in areas where they're used by upwards of 21%. However, a world in which you pass makes it to where that militarization no longer exists because our troops will no longer be there. That ensures that not only will our military no longer be accused by the public of committing atrocities, but also so that they can garner the support of the public, something that becomes increasingly important if we want an end to the riots. The third and final thing this legislation does to restore order and quell unrest is by denouncing Pelosi. Remember, that is the reason all of the conflict began in the first place. As soon as it was announced that President Trump and Vice President Pence were unfit to serve, Pelosi stepped in and immediately conflict arose. Conflict that led to 15,000 deaths in merely 7 days. In the case where we renounce Pelosi, radical Republicans lose their motives to riot, and all of the catastrophe that has caused bloodshed all across America can finally be seized. Passing this legislation is not only about protecting our individual states, but protecting what made the United States. Don't be on the wrong side of history when the dust settles.
Speech time, 3 minutes and 10 seconds. Questioners, please raise your placards. That'll first go to Senator. Okay, let me just see here. That'll first go to Senator Oriofe.
Hello, Mr. Pierre. Do you think aid is good?
Yep.
Okay, so under this legislation, we're going to be pulling out all of our troops, the same troops that are literally giving aid.
Well, the last bill we passed, it was a one-time installment, and there wasn't even a vote on it, so technically we didn't reinstate aid.
Okay, so no. Even then, at the highest ground, there are still troops in states that are adding aid and aiding the state. When you recall all of the troops, then don't you take away the aid?
So we can recall federal troops, but states can still have national guards.
Okay, but even that, I'm sorry, you cut out.
You aren't mutually.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The next question is for Senator Kaiser.
Hi, so after we actually like rebuke President Pelosi, what happens?
President Trump and Vice President Pence return to office.
Wait, but I thought they were still in the hospital. Like, isn't this just a symbolic thing?
Everything we heard is that they're stable.
Okay, so they just return to power while they're in the hospital?
If they're stable, that
Isn't
means
it just symbolic, saying that we don't approve of President Pelosi's
and they're able to serve.
So what happens after? Are we just supposed to expect the protest to stop?
Sorry, question time has elapsed. Okay. And it looks like Sydney has disappeared, so we're just gonna wait a second for her to come back. Sorry, guys.
Point of inquiry not pertaining to speaker.
Yes.
So just for clarification, recency reset for speakers, but like questioning just carried over. I'm just confused about the inconsistency.
No, question didn't carry. Question is also reset.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Okay, it looks like Sydney's Zoom went out, so let me make sure.
She's back in now.
Oh, are we? I don't see her.
I just added her back in.
Okay. Oh, so she'll. Okay, cool. All right, dope. All right, so we'll just wait for her to like get connected and stuff.
Hey, sorry, I'm good.
Yeah, you're good. All right. So seeing as the last speech was a speech in the affirmation, am I correct? Okay. We're now looking for a speech in the negation. Negative speakers, please raise your placards. That will go to Senator Medigovic.
Thank you. So everyone can hear me just fine. Is anyone not ready? All right, fantastic. Time is our most valuable commodity. Single-handedly, it can be the determinant of strategy, manipulation, and success. And personally, I think it's about time we wisened up and realized that the nation with the most powerful military in the world finally has it on its side to get the job done the way it needed to be. Please, fail. Fail today's bill to maximize the agency of not only our military, but this Congress fundamentally. Right now, I even argued upon this in my advocacy as a sponsor of the last legislation, but time has literally shown that our troops have efficacy, not only in reducing civilian casualties with the amount of riots in states going down, greatly detailed by Mr. Moss and other senators, but the very fact that we actually can see a result in the legislation that we're passing. The fear that I am so scared of in an affirmative world is that this doesn't come to fruition any longer after we pass a furthermore clause that completely denounces Pelosi, contributing to what is widespread political polarization in this country by even occurring to do that. Gallup poll in 2013 literally says that 75% of the gridlock in this country can be attributed to party polarization. A piece of legislation that only seeks to witch hunt Pelosi while seeking to benefit us divides politics in this country writ large. Even further than that, Congress produced 166% more legislation in the least polarized terms than the most polarized terms. Meaning that what we need to actually have meaningful reform and ensure that we have the providence to move forward as a Congress, taking efficient action, is not sort of split parties, but rather unite together. This isn't completed whatsoever when you start to witch hunt Nancy Pelosi. Even in the case that vetoes are brought into this, with the 2004 Senate report occurring right here, telling us that only 7% of vetoes are overridden. At the point where we can't have any future legitimacy, if we were to start to split politics, the only option is to focus on what's working as of right now. But let's quickly contend with what the affirmative has had to offer. First on what Mr. Abravan or Ms. Abravan tells us with how we can just send them back. Not only is this unnecessary transmission very costly, but inconsistent enforcement blurs the effectiveness of whatever we're trying to accomplish with our troops. Even more than that, with what we're talking about from Ms. Resnick when she tells us that we solve for this problem of abuses, that doesn't occur either. Because when a vacuum comes to fruition after our troops leave, rioters can now return to the prior state of being oppressors, killing 15,000 individuals in a single week like they did beforehand. You're excusing the same act just for a different person. And lastly, on Mr. Pierre's argument of how we solve the riots with this denouncement, that doesn't occur whatsoever just by a simple dichotomy of what is what. A denouncement doesn't get Pelosi out of office. If the reason why radical Republicans are mad is because she's in office, simply criticizing it isn't going to do anything, but rather even more spur political polarization in this country. Please fail.
Okay, speech time of 3 minutes and 10 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. That'll go to Senator Moss.
So is the House of Representatives currently led by Democrats or Republicans?
I forget. Like I've mixed them up. I'm so sorry. Could you remind me?
Democrats, right?
Okay, yeah.
Because we had like Representative Pelosi leading it. So seeing that, when we pass this resolution, won't we actually be turning against our own party and kind of denouncing partisanship?
No. So what I'm trying to argue here is that even if, like, let's say both houses passed and then that overrode however that is said, whatever Ms. Pelosi has to say as a president, I'm trying to say in the future, if we ever wanted to return troops because riots continued, vetoes are so problematic that it's likely not going to work.
Questioning time is allowed. Senator Resnick.
Thank you. Okay, so if we've seen that Ms. Pelosi has basically failed America, why is it not in our realm of ability to then denounce her? I'm confused why that would lead to polarization.
I wouldn't argue that she failed America. She took office when our vice president and president were unfit to actually lead.
And it led to extreme abuses of power at the hands of the military.
This wasn't her doing. Even at some repercussions, the military still managed to save countless amounts of lives.
Why are we
questioning? Sorry, my apologies. Questioning time has elapsed. Okay, now move on to the next speaker. Seeing as that was a speech in the negation, affirmative speakers, please raise their placards.
Point of personal privilege.
Yes.
Camera.
Yeah, just turn off your camera and mute yourself. Yep. Do we have any affirmation speakers? No affirmation speakers. Senator Shirokova, you have the floor unopposed for an affirmative speech, right?
Yeah, affirmative.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, is everyone ready? Okay. As a Congress, it is our job to protect our citizens, and we have failed miserably. We tried to help the people we swore to protect, and now they're dying on the streets at the hands of our government. We pushed off partisanship as a second-hand thought, under the veil that we were doing all we could for the safety of our citizens. But never have we been so wrong. Right now, it is more essential than it has ever been that we swallow our pride and accept all the mayhem we've caused. It's time to start back at square one and rebuild. We must affirm. First, pass this bill to protect democracy. Senators, we tried to protect our citizens, but this only ended in more violence. We ended up killing our own citizens, so Trump and Pence are expected to make a full recovery within a week. If we don't denounce President Pelosi, we are only legitimizing her power, which she has clearly been abusing. She has ignored our military's actions, and she has ignored the deaths and the injuries of our constituents. If we don't change the status quo, we will only be allowing Pelosi to blatantly support the deaths of our rioters caused by our government, especially with Trump and Pence coming back so soon. When did we become a Congress that tolerates blatant discrimination against our own citizens? Representative Morales, you are concerned with the lack of power on the state's part, but it's actually the negation of this bill which allows for more oppression on the part of the federal government. So if we don't take a stand to denounce Pelosi, we are only further legitimizing the now abusive rule of President Pelosi. Representative Medigovic, you speak about possible increased polarization that would be caused by denouncing President Pelosi. But right now, we are suffering from the problems caused by polarization. Members of our army are attacking these protesters who have different political views, and that is the only reason why. Understand that if we allow President Pelosi to continue ignoring this, we are only further promoting polarization because we are just accepting the fact that our army is literally harassing our citizens and Pelosi is doing nothing about it. If you remember anything from today's round, remember this. All across the country, people see us as the ultimate failure of what not to do. As a country, we've become the worst during this pandemic. And as a government, we've become executioners of our own people. At least admit our wrongdoings, or we will never have the trust of our democracy ever again.
Speech time of 2 minutes and 42 seconds. All questioners, please raise their placards. Okay, that'll first go to Senator Oriofe.
Are the rioters killing people?
Yes.
So then why are their lives upheld than the other constituents that are literally abiding by the law?
Wait, sorry, it's lagging. Can you repeat that, please?
I said, why are their,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
why are their lives upheld rather than citizens that are actually abiding the law?
I'm not saying that their lives are being upheld. I'm just saying that these are our citizens. These are the people we're supposed to be protecting. And
Yeah,
it
but
should
they
not
killed,
have gotten
but they killed more than 15,000 people.
Yes, and right now our army has been accused of killing these rioters just because of different political
People that killed our constituents that are actually abiding by the law.
views. Sorry, can you repeat that? It's lagging.
They're killing the people that were not following the law. Therefore, why is that a bad thing? If they are killing 15,000 people.
Okay, yes, they're killing
Sorry.
15,000 people. That's just not an excuse for us to be killing these rioters.
Question, sorry, Senator Morales. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute. You're good. Go ahead.
When we pass today's legislation, essentially, do we denounce President Pelosi, or do we denounce President Pelosi and the federal government's mishandling of the COVID-19 outbreak?
We denounce Pelosi because she has ignored the fact that the army that was sent out by us is literally killing our constituents.
Before today's legislation and further resolved, does it not say that we directly denounce President Pelosi's mishandling of the COVID-19 outbreak? So how do your points still stand if we aren't denouncing President Pelosi? We are putting down the mishandling of the COVID-19 outbreak.
No, we are denouncing her.
Question time has elapsed. Seeing as that was an affirmation speech, negative speakers, please raise your placards. Okay, that will go to Senator Kaiser. You have the floor.
I thank the chair. Hi, everyone. That's Senator Kaiser, spelled K-A-I-S-E-R. Once again, K-A-I-S-E-R, speaking on the negation side of today's legislation. Judges, any indication when you're ready? Ready. All right, good. PO ready? Great, thank you. On my first day in Congress, as an ambitious young senator, I was excited to see my country making real change. But over time, it seemed that this Congress has started to care more about the red and the blue versus the red, white, and blue. I think it's time we refocus today's debate to talk about who it's actually affecting, the people. And in doing so, you will see that the only option is to fail today's legislation. First, allow me to address one of the main points of contention of today's round, and that's whether or not our past efforts are working. Two responses. First, it doesn't matter. There is one thing that we agree that has been working in the past, and that is our medical aid. The New York Times explains on April 15th of 2020 that we have spent upwards of $2 trillion on medical relief and bills that aid our citizens that everyone in this Congress can agree is actually working. But here's the thing, the more and more we spend, it seems that the less money we have, and quickly we are running out of money. As the Brookings Institute explains, on March 25th of 2020, Congress is using money from savings, portfolio shifts into U.S. Treasury debt, and central banks in order to fund their relief efforts for the coronavirus. But soon enough, if the U.S. keeps spending excessively, they will run out of money. And the other thing is, we can't spend too much money without raising the interest rates. So this leaves us basically stuck between a rock and a hard place, because we know that our medical efforts are helping our our citizens, but we need money to fund them. And there is one place where we can get that, and that is the DoD budget. Because as the balance explains, literally 3 days ago, the Trump administration increased the DoD's budget for the fiscal year of 2020, especially in the areas of OCO and emergency spending. And if this isn't an emergency, then I don't know what is. Today, we can use the military's funding to actually help us and assist us to fund the coronavirus release. We can only do that, we can only tap into their budget because they are helping us right there in the front lines to help relief our citizens. But when we rebuke them, when we take them away, we can no longer tap into their budgets and use their efforts to actually help our citizens. The negation is the only side with tangible impacts, because right now we see that our medical efforts are actually helping our citizens. We are able to provide ventilators, medicine, and all types of medical aid because of what we're doing in the status quo. But when you affirm, you take all of that away. And finally, I would like to address an argument made by Representative Pierre, saying that when you rebuke President Pelosi, you actually decrease polarization and protest. But this simply isn't true. We can look to past precedent to understand why. This is explained by 538 just 5 days ago, explaining that the impeachment process might not have shifted anyone's views about Trump, but it did drive Americans further into their partisan camps, meaning that yes, we could rebuke President Pelosi and make a symbolic change, but that would only create more partisanship and more protests. At the end of the day, you failed today's legislation for the good of the people.
Speech time 3 minutes and 12 seconds. All questioners, please raise their placards. Okay, that'll first go to Senator Ambravan.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Senator. So you want the protests to stop, right?
Absolutely.
So by denouncing Pelosi, don't we help mitigate some of the conflict?
No, that's only a symbolic change. All we do is enforce the views of people who are already protesting and giving them more reason to protest because she won't be taken out of power.
Aren't they literally fighting because she was put into office after President Trump was deemed?
Yes, but understand that when you pass, you don't take her out of office. You just express your disapproval.
Yes, but the government expressing their opinion and rebuking her, doesn't that help?
That only further incentivizes people to protest by encouraging partisanship. It doesn't change anything.
But
Senator Shirokova.
Hi, Senator. So you're concerned with the well-being of our citizens, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so has Pelosi been ignoring the fact that our army is literally killing our citizens?
Yes, she has.
Okay, so wouldn't denouncing her help our citizens, because then we would be able to prevent the army from actually
Not at all. First, it's a waste of time because it's a symbolic change. Second, if anything, it makes it worse because it just entrenches these people in their partisan views, which, as I said, from past precedent, just makes this.
Fine. Even then.
Sorry, questioning time has elapsed. And we'll now move on to the next speaker. All those in the affirmation, please raise their placard. All those in the affirmation, please raise their placard. Any and all in the affirmation. Going once, going twice. Sold to the chair, who highly disagrees with a one-sided argument and one-sided debate. So seeing that, we'll now move on to a speech in the negation speakers. That'll go to Senator Oriofe.
Thank you so much. All right. This is Senator Oriofe speaking for the second and final time in this chamber. Of course, I'm at the leisure again. One moment. Honestly, I feel disrespected. I already told you to stay home. I already explained how important it is for us to stop the spread of the coronavirus. I'm appalled because our divisive rhetoric might not have mattered back then to any of us because we're at home on Zoom, but yet it destroyed the lives of thousands. In an era of intense uncertainty, a nation's people retreat into the tribes in which people feel the most secure. We need unity. We need stability. We need to negate. First, Mr. Pierre says that there are caveats within the negation. He says our warrants aren't very clear. Let me be very clear. The negation upholds human rights and humanitarian obligation in the long term. There are two essential parts to today's legislation. First, the first resolve clause. Senator Ambravan comes up here and starts saying that the further resolve called is good because we're going to be taking away our troops and essentially it will bring order. That logic doesn't make sense when they are literally the ones giving aid in the status quo. Look to NPR in March 3rd, 2020, when they refute her argument by explaining that states like South Carolina and California have literally been dependent on our military presence since they have created a political vacuum, since they have saved the lives of thousands. Here's the nuance. Even if you take the affirmation at their highest ground and say that pulling out troops will actually help in the long term, that doesn't matter because it gives these terrorist organizations, yes, they're terrorist organizations, time to regroup in the long term because there's no one to counter them. Here's the essential impact. As the National Guard Bureau said in a press release just last month, that around 400 National Guard personnel have been activated across 6 states to support operations to stem the spread of novel coronavirus. Mr. Pierre, you alluded in questioning saying that it's imperative for aid, but then you said that it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive because you can have the National Guard and states can have guards themselves. That's not true because just last Sunday, before President Trump caught coronavirus, he announced that the National Guard is under federal payroll. Therefore, they are under our regulation. Our policy should be the one that gives opportunities, not the ones that take them away, negate. Now, we need to look at the second whereas clause under today's legislation. Representative Shervoka starts off the misconception by saying that the second whereas clause is saying that our military has failed to end riots in multiple states. Look beyond the misguided rhetoric. Every single negation speaker already proved to you that almost 11 states are being supported. So when Representative Pierre says that the riots will stop, that can't actually happen because Mr. Moss already proved that we effectively create peace. As the RAND Corporation in April 2nd of 2017 tells us, that over analysis of 66 nations, military operations of an effective means of terminating conflicts and promoting democracy. They have been doing their job, and the job of their reason is to initially add they have been successful. Realize that in the end, if you affirm this legislation, you make sure that these people have to turn to these organizations that are literally terrorists and killing them day by day. That is misguiding what a merger and acquisition, making it synonymous to murder and execution. I'm urging you, don't make the same mistake twice and fail.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 10 seconds. All questioners, please raise their placards. Okay, that will first go to Senator. Okay, let me just look here. That will first go to Senator Pierre.
Thank you. Hey, Senator Oriafe. So why is it so important that aid solely has to go through the National Guard? Like, why can't it go through like a police officer?
Okay, because like that's not effective enough, especially when there's riots there.
Wait, why do you like have to be a part of the military to like hand out a box of food?
No, I'm saying if there are riots there, if you are handing out a box of food, you are literally like you're subject to being killed by the riot.
Right, but police have militarization. That's why the 1033 program exists. They have
but it's more or less. Why not have more to ensure that you can capitalize on what really happens?
Senator Ambervan.
Hi, Senator. So you want troops to stay in the area, right?
Yes.
So let's say we do affirm, even with the existence of the PCA, can't we just put troops back later?
I mean, that still creates a power vacuum. Power vacuum is bad.
But let's say we do affirm, don't we have the chance to see whether the conflict and whether the killings will actually end?
No, not necessarily. Like we've already seen, by that assumption, it's saying that conflict hasn't ended. It has. We see that almost the reduction have gone from 19 to 8. Like that's progress.
Questioning time has elapsed. Thank you, Senator. Seeing as that was a speech in the negation, affirmative speakers, please raise their placards. Senator Rodriguez, for an affirmative speech, you have the floor.
Thank you. For the second and final time today, that's Christian Rodriguez, whenever you're ready. And I'm assuming our presiding officer is ready. Okay. Clear. We were met with a crisis this country has never seen before. On top of a global pandemic, we had to deal with the possibility of a revolution. We acted. We made sure we suppressed those riots by any means necessary. But now I ask you all one thing. Please have sympathy and understand, although today's legislation has the possibility of ending this crisis as a whole, we need to realize affirming is our only goal. pass for one key reason. This legislation ends coronavirus coronavirus infections as a whole. So far, this has been really forgotten in terms of today's debate, despite the fact that on the first piece of legislation, this was one of the main clash points. Let's bring it back to relevance. So far on the negation, the only people to have mentioned it were Representative Kaiser and Representative Oriofe. Representative Kaiser explained to you that because of today's legislation, we would eliminate our ability to distribute aid because we eliminate our army. But then notice how Representative Pierre refutes this, saying that just because we get rid of our army doesn't mean we get rid of our aid entirely. Our National Guard can still distribute it. But Representative Oriofe attacks this, saying that our National Guard can't do anything. Even if you believe that, remember one key thing. This legislation does not repeal aid. It stays in the states, and if anything, is protected by police departments that Representative Medigovic, all the way on the last bill explained, have the equipment necessary to protect against rioters. And if anything, I'd argue our troops are worsening the effects of coronavirus. Why? That's explained by Dr. Jonathan Woodson, a former Assistant Secretary of Defense, on February 29th of 2020, who explains the greatest threat to military presence in any country, despite domestically or foreign, is the fact that their diseases spread rapidly. Why? Because military officials are always in close quarters, unable to separate from each other. If one person in our military has coronavirus, everyone has it. By repealing troops, that's no longer a problem, and coronavirus infections won't spread. That is a reason to affirm. Second, the main clash point in the second half of this debate is whether or not today's legislation would finally put an end to violence, and there have been two narratives on the negation that claim that this simply will not happen. The first narrative, that today's legislation would only perpetuate political polarization, and therefore nothing would come to an end. And this was mainly championed by Representative Medigovic, who told us today's legislation only makes sure polarization gets worse. Here's the thing. He's fundamentally forgetting one key thing, which is that Nancy Pelosi was put into power by Congress. If we say Nancy Pelosi is not our president and we should not be supporting her, that does one thing, denouncing party lines and saying we do the right thing. Second, everyone else on the negation has basically said troops created solvency, therefore let's just keep them in the regions and then have more solvency. That's flawed for two reasons. First, The Economist explains in December of 2018, whenever we have troops deployed anywhere in the world, Afghanistan, Middle East, even our own country, we will always see initial success, but then it stops. Why? Because we ultimately can't stop political beliefs that don't align with ours. This legislation creates a solution that saves so many people.
Speech time, 3 minutes and 13 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. They'll first go to Senator Medigovic.
Hi, Mr. Medigovic.
Is it easy to prosecute military personnel in times of intense chaos?
Not really.
No. So isn't actually having some sort of peace or placation a precursor to accountability?
I simply believe that today's legislation, in terms of stopping violence, it's really no different than the status quo. Here's why. With today's legislation, by repealing troops, you simply go back to the way things were. But if you don't pass, nothing changes. We're going to still see the same level of violence.
Wait, so then all of our military who has committed an egregious act should just be able to go scot-free. You need accountability.
This legislation doesn't create accountability.
Senator Kaiser.
I'm on AF, so.
Hi, Senator. So we've been wasting or spending a lot of money on the coronavirus relief, right?
Are you specifically regarding the last piece of legislation or just in general?
No, just in general.
Yeah, a lot of money.
Okay, and eventually we're gonna run out, right?
I mean, yeah, just logically, that's what happens.
So as I said, if we work with the Army, can we tap into their funding and use it for more relief?
So as I explained, deploying the Army actually increases infections, and we already have other alternatives to deploy this aid, such as law enforcement officials.
Okay, but if we take the
Senator, I'm sorry.
now,
Question time has elapsed. Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, negation speakers, please raise your placards. Senator Dorworth, you have the floor unopposed. Senator Rodriguez, did you have a point of inquiry?
Point of personal privilege to exit the chamber.
Yeah, just turn your camera off and mute yourself. Don't leave the call. Yeah, thank you.
Everyone good?
Yeah.
Cool. In the past month, Americans have become petrified at the same people that are supposed to protect them. But this is because of our actions and the ones that we have actually failed to make. But throughout today's debate, we need to focus on prudence, not panic, facts, not fear, and science, not stigma. So first, let's focus on the fear and separate it from facts. When you pass today's legislation, you would enable unnecessary abuse. And that's by repealing the posse comitatus, the law that everybody in this round has overlooked so far. Right now in the status quo, riots have been reduced to just 8 states, yet we still are targeting the other 11 under this resolution. But what we have to realize is that that's no reason that we should just completely repeal this entire law. And before we even started debating this legislation in the one we were debating a month ago, what we had to realize is that the president could deploy troops whether or not he wanted to. We didn't even pass the legislation we were debating last time, and she still found a way to deploy troops because of the Insurrection Act. The Hill in April 20th, 2020 says that the Insurrection Act would allow the president to deploy troops in the event of panic outbreaks due to COVID-19. But here's the conception. Right now in the status quo, they can only do that if there's unlawful obstruction, like riots in the streets. This is the exact scenario that we're debating. But when you repeal this, when you repeal the posse comitatus, you completely get rid of the requirement that people have to have unlawful obstruction. So Senator Pierre, this doesn't encourage cooperation, it encourages totality. But when we have more people that are subject to the abuse of the president, that means that civilian groups, protest groups, and any group that is trying to protest could be at subject. And this is inherently harmful because the Cato Institute in 2017 did a meta study of the 1033 programs and different programs that got certain funding. And they found that a full expenditure of military equipment leads to a 169% increase in civilian deaths. So Representative Rodriguez, sure, even if we aren't recalling all aid, we're still giving the president an unprecedented right to basically do whatever he wants. That's the biggest impact in today's debate. But next, we have to focus on panic, because right now in the status quo, people are panicking about coronavirus and the pandemic that it's leading to. But what we have to realize is that even though millions of jobs are going away, you only worsen the amount of infections and the amount of deaths that are going to be gone in the status quo. Let's focus back on stigma, because right now in the status quo, there's a stigma that if you leave your house, you are not doing a good thing. When you pass it as legislation, you break that seal, because more riots are going to occur because of the lack of support that we're having from militants right now. If we get rid of all of our troops, then that tells people they can go back out and riot. When more people are rioting, more people are leaving their home, and that will completely break the seal. And this is important because Axios in April 2020 says that Anthony Fauci says that social distancing is the difference between 60,000 deaths and 100,000 deaths, or even 200,000 deaths. So Representative Rodriguez, when you talk about social distancing and the amount of infections that people will get from this, we actually would see more infections long term. At the end of the day, when you look at the scope of today's debate, you have to stand with the negation, because ultimately we stand for prudence, not panic, facts, not fear, and science, not stigma.
Speech time, 3 minutes and 12 seconds. All questioners, please raise their placards. Senator Oriofe first.
Okay, so what was the initial reason that riots were increased in the first place?
Because of Pelosi being president.
Okay, so is that not going to be solved under the second for the resolve clause?
No, Pelosi's still going to be our president.
Okay, but even then, doesn't that prove that we have we have a reason over Pelosi, therefore people have a reason to stop rioting?
All the bill does is denounces President Pelosi. That doesn't mean.
Okay, look, even if we take that to the highest ground, the rioters does not like our presence there with you using our military.
I'm sorry, Senator Resnick.
Okay, so if under this legislation we finally repeal the troops that are acting inappropriately against protesters, doesn't that give them an incentive to then stay home and avoid their protest even further?
No, because people are now just going to go riot again. Like literally before this, there was 15,000 deaths.
What?
When you pass it as legislation, yes, we denounce Pelosi being president, but she's still going to be president, right? So people are still going to riot, and that doesn't change.
Okay, do you honestly think that President Trump is just going to give up his presidency?
He's not giving up his presidency.
If he's well now.
He's literally on his deathbed.
Question time has elapsed. Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, Senator Rodriguez.
Motion to re-enter the chamber.
Oh yeah, you're good. Okay. Okay, all those in the negation, please raise their placard. Any in the, yes, Senator Blackwell.
I believe that was a negation speech, correct?
I'm saying I'm calling for, that was a speech in the, was that a speech in the affirmation?
I believe it was negation, am I wrong?
Negation. It was negation?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's all those in the affirmation.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, Senator Blackwell, you have the floor.
I think,
and I believe this is
Yep.
Go ahead. Sorry, I believe this will be the last speech of the day.
That's Senator Blackwell speaking for the first and last time in this session. Please give me a nod or a smile when you're ready. Sorry, my second.
And when this speech is over, I'm just going to call for orders of the day. BT dubs.
All good?
You're good.
Okay. We know Lil Huddy as a colleague of ours, but long before Senate days, this man was popular among teens on the video streaming app called TikTok. Now he is trying to undermine this act, doing a disservice to the United States Constitution and our ethics. We must neglect President Pelosi more than ever and affirm. But first, you must affirm because repealing the Posse Comitatus Act simply goes against all of our ethics as a nation. In our very own Constitution, the words consent of the governed holds true in every scenario, and this is completely going against that. What if North Korea tragically set off a nuclear weapon in downtown Washington, D.C. and destroyed the Capitol? Would we throw our hands up in the air and say, well, we can't vote? We understand that it is critical that we vote on this legislation despite what is going on with Senator Schumer. Nothing should stand in the way of taking steps to secure our nation. There is nowhere to go on the floor of the House and the Senate. We must meet this challenge. The lives of Americans are at stake. The heartbeat of this country is at stake. There is too much to lose if we don't take immediate action. We must protect the lives of those who've been damaged by these troops. When protesters stormed the streets of Ferguson, Missouri in August 2014, many thought tear gas would be it. However, tear gas led to rubber bullets, and rubber bullets led to smoke bombs. And at the end of the day, the United States is at fault. This was the local police we're talking about, not the strongest army the world has ever seen. While some may argue that these people are domestic terrorists, they do not deserve this kind of horrific treatment. In the past legislation, there was proposed aid to combat suffering. But now the victims of this will have to suffer in silence. Senator Oriofi, you mentioned that states like South Carolina rely on our military to help them in the long run. But the fact is that these states do not need our military to fight this. This could be held to the local police forces in these areas, as well as the National Guard, that will greatly reduce the amount of damage caused. This point is made by Senator Pierre, and it's a great one. The police force is militarized themselves and are trained for these situations. Why does it have to be the police force or National Guard? Why can't it be the police force or National Guard? Senator Dorff, you say that this will help break the stigma and encourage those protesting to do it even more. However, the affirmation is not advocating for no police response at all. We just believe that it should not be held to the national government, and it should be held to local governments and the National Guard. I agree with Senator Rodriguez when he says that those in the military are much more prone to contract the coronavirus than the general public. And let me put that in a number for you. As of the Defense Department in early May, almost 500 service members tested positive this week for the virus. This is alarming and shows that if we continue to put troops on the ground, this virus will double among a group that has already seen horrific effects of it. We need to come together as a country. This military station on every corner in the 19 states is not the solution to ensuring the safety of Americans. President Pelosi is not working for Americans. The heartbeat of this country is at stake. There is too much to lose. Affirm.
Speech time, 3 minutes and 12 seconds. All questioners, please raise their placards. Senator Moss.
Did the protesters in Ferguson, Missouri murder anyone?
No, but they were very disobedient, if you may.
Okay, so the protesters in this case have murdered 15,000, probably more than that at this point, people. So how can the two be compared? Isn't one defending our country against terrorists, the other is brutality?
Yes, but at the same time, you cannot compare those who have actually killed people, like in this case. Like some people in this case aren't actually killing people, and you cannot clump them in the same group.
Senator Oriofe.
Hey, Mr. Blackwell. So at first we had 19 states and now we have 8 states. Is that not progress?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so then why is the National Guard and our military in these states a bad thing if we're literally making progress?
I'm not denying that we're making progress. I'm just saying that if we want to, as a nation, have a good look when it comes to the military brutality that we're seeing right now, and that has completely gotten out of hand, we need to take a look at other alternative options like local government and National Guard.
considering this is the last speech, let's do some weighing here. This is the lives of thousands in the state.
I'm sorry, Senator Oriofe. Question time has expired. My apologies. Okay, I'm going to unanimously call for orders of the day. We'll now move into previous question. I'm just going to ask you, if you're in the app, make sure your camera's on, make sure you have it directly. I just want to get a visual. All those in the affirmation, please raise up their placards. Just hold it to the screen so I can get an accurate count. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I count 6. All those against? All those against? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I believe there is no abstentions because we only have 12 competitors. And as the President of the United States Senate, I am the one tasked with breaking this tie, and it is an honor to do so. And I will cast my vote. This is a tough choice. I'm going to cast my vote in the affirmative. I believe in the affirmative. Thank you. And from a vote of 6 to 7 or 7 to 6, this bill will pass. Congratulations. And we have an update for all of you. And this is just a kind of looking forward. In response to the passage of the resolution to rein in the military and denounce the government, the following updates have actually occurred. Both President Trump and Mike Pence have both fully recovered and have taken power. They have resumed office once again, taking power from Pelosi and basically reinstating their power. After the Pomme Comitatus Act is repealed under the resolution, re-implemented under the resolution, the executive branch has used an executive order to federalize the National Guard in the 8 states that still have major outbreaks of COVID-19. While it ultimately is effective, the delayed action by the federal government prolonged the rioting and spread COVID-19. Moreover, congressional complacency has resulted in a lack of trust and respect for the legislature. Representative Lil Huddy is also hailed as a hero by the American people, and May 2nd is now America's annual celebration of Huddy Holiday. Congratulations. It's really an honor. Huddy Holiday is really going to be a great day. So congratulations to all our competitors. I believe we have some other updates coming. Congratulations to everyone on a great round. Round of applause for yourself. Silent round of applause. It's been an honor presiding again. I'm Isaac Applebaum. So just good job, guys. If judges want to say anything, it really doesn't matter. But I recommend staying on the call. Stay on the call, and we'll have some updates for you guys.
Hey everyone, it's Matt again. Just wanted to let everyone know, if you can, stay on the call or mute yourself, or I guess you can come back, but I guess it'd be ideal to just turn off your camera and your microphone. We're gonna go tab the final results and we can come back and do the award ceremony here in this Zoom call. So we'll send out a remind message when we want everyone to come back. So just so you guys know what's going on.
Also, judges, if you would like to dip, you're good to dip.
Yeah, you just fill out the Google form and
yeah, fill out the Google form, then and dip, then fill out the Google form. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
and
everyone.
thank you, yeah, and thank your judges. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Sydney. Thanks, Tina. Thanks, Weston. Thanks, Rainan. Thank you guys so much. Thank Jack. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm gonna head out, but good job, everyone, and it's great to see all of you coming together for such like a great effort. I just want to preface this by saying that, like, if I've judged you before, you probably know that my ballots are a lot harsher than I mean them. I've judged actually like a number of you before, but please reach out to my Facebook or Instagram if you want to talk about anything else. Yeah, great job.
Also,
Bye.
Judges, don't rank me. just by the way, I just want to make sure you
You're
don't
not
rank
an
me.
option, actually, so don't.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure. Okay, just yeah, don't rank me. All right, thanks, guys. Thank you, Sydney. Thank you.
Great job.
You did a good job. You should be proud of yourselves. And also, again, thank you for everybody who set up this event, for putting on a really good
thank you
activity for everybody.
Thanks, guys. All right, I'm dipping.
12. We have 12.
Yeah,
all right.
Let's go.
Let's go.
So we're gonna start. Hi guys, my name is Matt. I was the executive director for this tournament. Just like every award ceremony, there are a few thank yous that we should probably make before we go on. First, to Val, who is one of our debate directors, and Connor, who is our public outreach director. Thank you guys whenever we had any kind of problem for always being there to step in, like, what can I do? Can I do this? Can I do that? I felt like anytime there was some kind of bump or hiccup, they were always there to pick up the slack. And thank you for always bringing in a good laugh too, like on our group FaceTime calls. It just made things a lot more fun. Sean was our tournament consultant. Thank you for answering all of our questions about logistics. You were the only one with previous online debate tournament experience on like the tab side. So you knew a lot of the ins and outs about things that, which if you don't think about it before, are kind of complicated with an online tournament, and you made them go really smooth. So thank you so much for that, and go Gators.
Sean's the GOAT, he's the master.
Isaac was the tab director, and I can honestly say of all of the tournaments I've seen, both in person and online, Isaac is the fastest working tab director I've ever seen. Like these breaks got out in like 10 minutes or something crazy. So like Isaac, all the algorithms and like math and stuff that I cannot
Google
do,
Sheets.
you did so well. So
Yeah.
thank you. And this is a shameless plug because you've already plugged the hub. I'm gonna plug your TikTok, which is at Isaac Applebaum for you. So go hit him up.
Please.
Alexis was our social media director. Thank you for all the fun Facebook mom posts and late night ice cream mukbangs on FaceTime, as well as like all the long FaceTime calls. We figured out everything, whether it was like Instagram, how to get out to competitors, how to compile a really strong judge panel, and just bouncing off any kind of idea that popped into our heads. Like, I feel like you were always there to talk about anything, any hour, any moment. So like, thank you genuinely for always being there. And follow her on Instagram at Alexis Last, and you can see more Facebook mom fun. It's not just for our Instagram, it's on her own too. Melodie and Perry were our debate directors, as well as Val. Thank you for just being so smart and always being so eager to work hard and be productive, especially when it came to the scenario, which a lot of this is like very complicated, you know, federal, state, the article amendment 25 of the Constitution, like a lot of really niche things in policy. They were always on top of it. They always redirected the conversation when we got off track to make sure we actually got through it. And they also were just like a lot of fun. Like we made fun of Melodie and her inability to make a peanut butter sandwich. Harry's pronunciation of the PCA. So just like, thank you for making things like really fun. It made the experience both enjoyable and effective. To our judges, if any of you are still watching, thank you to the 30 people who spent their time this weekend judging these rounds. It's the people like you. Without the judges, none of this is possible. They're the ones that made this entire opportunity possible for all of us. And thank you for always giving like genuine feedback, because a lot of tournaments, you can just have some ranks that attach some numbers to how you did, but you don't learn anything from it. So by all of them doing ballots, which you can get feedback on what you can improve on, it makes it just both an enjoyable and an enriching experience for all the competitors. So thank you to our judges. And finally, to our competitors, thank you for spending your time with this ragtag group of high schoolers that are trying to figure out how to host an online debate tournament, kind of by the seat of our pants. Through all the little bumps and hiccups, I felt like you guys were always there. You were always understanding. I didn't hear one person the entire weekend complain. Even if there was any kind of issue, they were always super understanding and supportive. So thank you for all of that. With that said, just thank you to everyone. I really appreciate this. You've all made this possible. You know, when I like imagined doing this, when I came up with the idea, I never thought it would be so successful, both on a tab side, from an amazing competitor pool to all the money that we raised, just everything all together. So thank you to all of you, because you all made this possible.
And thank you, Matt. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thanks,
you.
Matt.
I love you all.
Literal best executive
guess
director
with
we could have
that-
asked for.
Love you, Matt.
I cry. With that, I'll pass it on to Melodie.
Okay, hey everybody, I'm Melodie. So I just want to say, first of all, thank you to Matt, an amazing executive director who really like guided us a lot. And like, even though he doesn't have past online tournament experience, he was really like a steady force that I think really helped all of the directors to kind of gather together and be like, we're going to do this and it's going to be great. He's just an overwhelmingly positive person and he's very on it. And so we really appreciate you, Matt. So you can't give us that many thank yous without us giving you the same. On the side of, I guess, what is the most important thing, obviously competition is something that means a lot to every single person here. You wouldn't have devoted a weekend of your quarantine to doing an online debate tournament if it didn't mean something. But I think above all, this has always been about the National Domestic Violence Hotline that we're raising money for. Obviously, quarantine is keeping everybody in their homes, and unfortunately that does include domestic violence victims, and they aren't talked about nearly enough, and they aren't reported on nearly enough, and they often don't get recognized as a real and prominent issue. But in running this tournament and all of you just being a part of this, we've been able to raise like $1,471, which is just doubled. I'm not going to do that math because I'm not good at math, but if somebody would like to do that, it would be a great time to do that. That's being matched by an anonymous donor. So that's just an incredible amount of money for an amazing cause that is doing so much great work for the people whose lives are so heavily impacted by COVID-19. I think a lot of the times we talk about doing stuff that goes beyond the chamber, and we talk about important issues, and I feel like this was the opportunity for everybody to really make substantive change. And so I feel like everybody has taken that opportunity, and we really appreciate it. I'm sure the National Domestic Violence Hotline appreciates it. If you haven't donated yet, it's still open, and you guys can go and donate after you're done at the award ceremony. We obviously would really appreciate it. We are about $20 shy of our $1,500 goal. So if you guys could go drop anything that you have in there, we'd really appreciate it. But in terms of how it's been so far, it's honestly more than we ever could have imagined in terms of what we could raise for this amazing cause. And we just appreciate you all so much for really helping us to push something that was so much greater than just ourselves.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Alexis. Ditto to everything that Melodie said, but also on that note, I think working on a team as dedicated as the one that we compiled really taught us about not only our limits, but how to be creative, especially like now that debate has moved completely online for the rest of the season. If you guys didn't know, our tournament partnered with Beyond Resolved, which is an initiative fighting for inclusivity and equality in debate. Basically, their initiative provides either extremely cheap or free coaching or free services to teach people debate with Congress, PF, and a little bit of STEM. I know they're moving towards speech as well. Basically, they're moving towards an inclusivity movement because a lot of minorities in debate are not represented nearly as enough as they need to be. But there's also a lot of kids who don't have any accessibility to debate resources, like a lot of us have been lucky to have throughout our years of competing. So Beyond Resolved is working extremely hard to make sure that a lot of those kids can have the access to the same resources that we do. So with their partnership, they've promised that everyone in the final round, so all 12 of you, are getting Beyond Resolved stickers. And on that note, I want to promote the May Mayhem speech tournament. It's happening May 23rd through May 25th. They're offering HIDI, POI, info, and oratory. Their website is tinyurl.com/May Mayhem speech. They were the second part of our tournament, just not on the same weekend. And our GoFundMe is going to be open until their tournament is over. Unfortunately, it won't be matched past the $2,500, but you can still donate up until that point. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Val.
Hi, everybody. Okay, well, my part's low-key insignificant compared to Melodie and Alexis because I'm talking about our stickers. Why did I just say Beyond Resolve? May Mayhem Invitational is promoting stickers, like we made them on Redbubble, and we're going to send out the link for you guys to be able to purchase them. Matt, hold it up again. It's like that. It's like basically our logo. And we're going to be sending out the link to that. And every sticker that you guys buy, all the funds that we receive are going to be donated to the same National Domestic Violence Hotline. And I really hope that you guys go out and buy stickers because this tournament has been such a success and it's been such an honor to be part of it. And I just think that it's going to a great cause. And from that, I'm going to pass it on to Perry, who's going to give the results.
Hi everyone, I'm Perry, and I just want to first start off by thanking all the other tournament staff. They made this weekend very special, and this entire process has been a great experience. But this is the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's go towards the results. So in 12th place, we have...
Perry.
Yes?
Can we do a clap?
Yes, actually we should do that.
Okay, everyone unmute yourselves.
Oh, wait, one more thing. Sorry. Can every tournament director turn off their camera? And once your name is called, please turn off your camera. It's just more dramatic that way.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
All about this is
Perry, you're just doing top
12
till 7th, right? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, just making sure. Okay.
Okay, so in 12th place, we have Veronica Shirakova. In 10th place, we have Charlie Blackwell. In 9th place, we have Jasmine Morales. In 8th place, in 9th place, we have Michael Kaiser. In 8th place, I can't count, my bad. In 8th place, we have Chris Dorworth. In 7th place, we have Aditi Ambravan. In 6th place, we have Gianluca Medigovic. Yes. In 5th place, we have Asher Moss.
Perry Gilberd.
Perry.
Perry.
Yeah.
Perry, check the chat.
Perry.
What?
Perry, stop.
What?
Isaac, you're supposed to read
Stop
the
announcing ranks, all right?
Oh, right.
All right. Sorry. Okay, so do you want me to step in for top
Yes.
4?
Yes.
Okay, top 4. Okay. So okay, sorry. Okay, so our top 4, first of all, I'm Isaac, by the way. It's been a really big honor doing this tournament. I really want to thank the rest of the staff. It was a really fun time. I really appreciated all of you. It was really good, really great tournament experience, and I'm very proud of all the competitors and the TAP staff. So in 5th place, we have Asher Moss. Okay. In 4th place, Madison Resnick. And in 3rd place, Quentin Oreo-Fay. In 2nd place, your runner-up at the May Mayhem Invitational in Congressional debate, Mr. Giberson Pierre, which makes your tournament champion of the May Mayhem Invitational, Senator Christian Rodriguez. Congratulations, sir.
Yay.
And you guys can come off the video now.
Yay.
Congratulations to everyone. It was a real honor. All of you are great competitors. It was a great final round, and all of you should be very proud of yourselves.
Definitely.
And results will be out, like the whole results packet will either be out later tonight or tomorrow morning.
Also, all of the judges have been keeping ballots for all of the rounds, so we're going to try to compile all of those to get out to you as soon as possible as well.
Yeah.
Look out for a remind tonight with the link to the sticker. Also the link to our GoFundMe in case you haven't seen it and you would like to donate. And otherwise, yeah, we'll send out a remind message hopefully this weekend with the results that you're able to see that and all of your ballots.
Honestly, probably tonight. I work fast.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, with that said, thank you guys again so much for May Mayhem. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
The second half with the speech tournament, May 23rd. Okay.
Sounds good.
Kids.
Okay, that's
All right.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 All right, the live is about to end.